The smell of cedar wood and old varnish. That is what I remember most. It is not the smell of money, nor the scent of expensive perfume that my sister Sophie loves so much. It is the smell of time. I was 10 years old the first time I really understood it. I was sitting on the floor of Grandma Rose's workshop, a dusty, sunlit room at the back of her estate. The air was filled with floating specks of dust that danced in the light like tiny golden insects. "Don't force it, Elias," Grandma Rose said softly. Her voice was like the wood she loved, firm but warm. I was trying to pry open the lid of an antique music box. It was jammed. My fingers were hurting and I was frustrated. I wanted to hear the song inside. I wanted it now. "It's broken, Grandma," I said, ready to throw it into the trash bin. "We should just buy a new one." Grandma Rose stopped sanding the leg of a chair. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and infinitely patient. She walked over, her floral apron covered in sawdust, and sat down beside me. "It is not broken, little one," she whispered. "It is just stubborn. It has forgotten how to sing because no one has listened to it for a long time." She took the box from my hands. She didn't force the lid. Instead, she took a small dropper of oil. She applied a tiny amount to the hinges. Then, she waited. She hummed a melody while she waited. She wiped the dust from the intricate carvings of birds and flowers on the lid. "Most people think value comes from what is new," she told me, her thumb rubbing a rough spot on the wood. "But the real value is in the story, in the scars. You have to be patient, Elias. You have to listen to what the wood is telling you." After 5 minutes, she gently nudged the lid. It didn't pop open instantly. She nudged it again. Slowly, with a soft creak, the box opened. Inside, a tiny ballerina spun around. The mechanism clicked, and the tinkling notes of Claire de Lune filled the dusty room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It sounded like rain falling on a tin roof. It sounded like peace. "You see?" she smiled, handing it back to me. "Everything has a second chance, if you have the patience to find the key." That was 22 years ago. Now, the music has stopped. I stood in the corner of the grand living room, wearing a black suit that felt too tight around the shoulders. It was the only suit I owned. I bought it 5 years ago for a job interview I didn't pass. Today, I wore it to bury the only person who ever understood me. Grandma Rose was gone. The room was filled with people, but it felt empty. There were lilies everywhere. The smell was overwhelming. It was a sweet, heavy scent that tried to mask the reality of death, but only made it more obvious. My brother Julian stood near the fireplace. At 40, Julian was the picture of success. He wore a custom-tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than my car. He was holding a glass of scotch, nodding seriously as he spoke to a man I recognized as a local politician. I could hear snippets of their conversation. "It's a tragic loss, truly," Julian said, his face arranging itself into a practiced mask of grief. "But we have to look to the future. The estate occupies 5 acres of prime land. The zoning potential is incredible." He took a sip of his drink, checking his gold Rolex watch. He wasn't mourning a grandmother. He was assessing an asset. On the velvet sofa, my sister Sophie was crying. Or at least, she was making the sounds of crying. She held a lace handkerchief to her eyes, dabbing carefully so she wouldn't smudge her mascara. A friend of hers, A woman with equally high cheekbones and expensive jewelry was rubbing Sophie's back. "I don't know what I'll do without her," Sophie wailed, loud enough for the room to hear. "She was my inspiration, my muse." I looked away. I felt a knot of anger tighten in my stomach, but I swallowed it down. That was what I always did. I swallowed my feelings. I was Elias, the quiet one, the invisible one, the one who didn't have a real career, the one who played with wood while his siblings conquered the world. I walked out to the veranda to escape the suffocating smell of lilies. The garden was overgrown. Grandma had been too sick to tend to it in the last year, and I had been too busy taking care of her to manage the weeds. I sat on a wooden bench, one I had repaired for her last summer. I ran my hand along the smooth armrest. I remembered how her hands looked in her final days, frail, paper-thin skin. But she had held my hand with surprising strength. "Don't let them change you, Elias," she had whispered 3 nights ago. "You have the eyes of an artist, but the heart of a healer. That is a heavy burden, but it is also a gift." I didn't feel gifted. I felt lost. I was 32 years old. I worked as a freelance furniture restorer, which was a polite way of saying I scraped by, fixing broken chairs for people who didn't want to pay professional prices. I lived in a studio apartment that smelled of turpentine. And now, the anchor of my life was gone. "Elias?" I looked up. It was Julian. He stepped onto the veranda, lighting a cigarette. He didn't offer me one. "You're hiding," Julian said, blowing smoke into the evening air. "It looks bad. You should be inside shaking hands. Mr. Sterling is here." "I don't care about Mr. Sterling," I said quietly. "You should," Julian scoffed. "He's the executor of the estate. The reading of the will is tomorrow morning at 9 sharp. Don't be late. I have a flight to Tokyo in the afternoon, and I don't want this dragging on." "Is that all this is to you?" I asked, looking at the weeds choking the rose bushes. "A transaction?" Julian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Grow up, Elias. Grief is a luxury. The rest of us have bills to pay, big bills. Do you have any idea how much the maintenance on this house costs? Grandma was bleeding cash for years. We need to settle this fast." He flicked his cigarette butt onto the stone path. He didn't even watch where it landed. "Just be there," he said, turning back to the party. "And try to look a little less pathetic. It reflects poorly on the family." He left me alone in the dark. I bent down, picked up the cigarette butt, and put it in my pocket to throw away later. Grandma hated litter. Even now, I couldn't stop following her rules. The offices of Sterling, Black and Associates were located in a glass tower downtown. The conference room was cold. It was dominated by a long mahogany table that shone like a mirror. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded in my lap. Julian arrived exactly at 9. He walked in with the energy of a storm, talking loudly into a Bluetooth headset. "Sell the crypto, all of it. I don't care if it's down. I need liquidity. Yes, now." He tapped the device to end the call and sat down, drumming his fingers on the table. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that the expensive suit couldn't hide. Sophie arrived 5 minutes late. She wore a black dress that was stylishly cut, perhaps a bit too revealing for a legal meeting, and oversized sunglasses. She carried a designer handbag that I knew cost more than my entire year's earnings. "Traffic was a nightmare," she sighed, dropping into a leather chair. She pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. but I suspected it was from a lack of sleep, not crying. Let's get this over with. I have a photo shoot at noon. Mr. Sterling entered the room. He was an ancient man, stooped and grey, carrying a thick leather folder. He had been Grandma's lawyer for 40 years. He looked at us over his spectacles. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of sympathy, or perhaps pity. He sat down at the head of the table and opened the folder. The sound of paper rustling was the only noise in the room. Rose Thorne was a remarkable woman, Mr. Sterling began, his voice dry and crackling. She was eccentric, yes, but she was meticulous. She left very specific instructions regarding the distribution of her assets. Julian leaned forward. Cut to the chase, Sterling. We know the estate is valuable. Just tell us the split. Mr. Sterling ignored him. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. To my eldest grandson, Julian Thorne. Julian stopped drumming his fingers. He held his breath. I leave the sum of $5 million in cash, drawn from my various investment accounts. Additionally, I leave you my shares in the Thorne Holdings Group, to do with as you see fit. Julian let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. He closed his eyes and slumped back in his chair. $5 million, he whispered. Thank God. I saw his hand shake slightly as he reached for a glass of water. It wasn't greed I saw in his face. It was relief. Desperate relief. It made me wonder just how much trouble he was in. To my granddaughter, Sophie Thorne. Sophie sat up straighter, clutching her handbag. I leave the seaside villa in Malibu, along with its contents. Furthermore, I leave to you my entire personal collection of vintage jewelry, including the sapphire tear set and the emerald brooch. Sophie gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. The Malibu house? And the jewels? She turned to Julian, her eyes wide. The jewelry alone is worth millions. The house is... Oh my God. She was already calculating. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about the memories in that house. She was thinking about the listing price. She was thinking about the Instagram posts. And finally, Mr. Sterling said, the room went quiet. Julian and Sophie turned to look at me. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and dismissal. They had already won the lottery. Whatever was left for me was just crumbs. To my youngest grandson, Elias Thorne. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't want millions. I didn't want a villa. I just wanted something that felt like her. Maybe the old piano. Maybe the workshop. Mr. Sterling paused. He cleared his throat. He reached into a small manila envelope inside the folder. I leave the contents of Storage Unit 4 at the Old Harbor Docks. He slid a small object across the polished mahogany table. It spun slowly and came to a stop in front of me. It was a key. It was old. The metal was dark and pitted with rust. The head of the key was shaped like a clover, but one of the leaves was bent. It looked like something you would find in a junk drawer and throw away without a second thought. And? Julian asked, looking at the lawyer. What else? The bonds? The art? That is all, Mr. Sterling said. Silence. Absolute heavy silence. Then Sophie giggled. It started as a snort and turned into a laugh. A storage unit? At the docks? You mean that old industrial park that's been condemned for years? Julian looked at me and his face twisted into a smirk. Well, Elias, it seems Grandma finally gave you something that matches your ambition. Junk. Storage Unit 4, Mr. Sterling continued, ignoring them. And the land it sits on is now the sole property of Elias Thorne. What's in it? Sophie asked, leaning over to look at the rusty key. Old newspapers? Her collection of knitting patterns? I am not privy to the contents, Mr. Sterling said. But Mrs. Thorne was very clear. This is Elias's inheritance, total and complete. I reached out and touched the key. The metal was cold and rough against my fingertips. It felt heavy, heavier than it looked. $5 million for Julian, a luxury villa and jewels for Sophie, and a rusty key for me. I felt a stinging sensation behind my eyes. It wasn't jealousy. I had never expected to be rich. But this felt like a joke. It felt like Grandma was laughing at me from the grave. Had I not been enough? I was the one who drove her to her appointments. I was the one who cooked her soup when she was sick. I was the one who sat with her and listened to her stories about the war, about her travels, about the grandfather I never met. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket. The arrogance was back, stronger than ever. Well, this has been illuminating. I have calls to make. Sophie, congrats on the house. Elias, good luck with your trash. He walked over and patted me on the shoulder. It was a condescending pat, the kind you give to a dog. Don't worry, little brother. When I liquidate the stocks, I'll write you a check. I won't let you starve. Consider it charity. I don't want your money, I said. My voice was low, trembling. Don't be proud, Sophie said, standing up and checking her reflection in the window. You're going to need it, unless you plan to live in a storage unit. They laughed. They walked out of the conference room together, discussing real estate agents and auction houses, their voices fading down the hallway. I sat there, alone with Mr. Sterling. The lawyer closed the folder. He looked at me with those tired, ancient eyes. She loved you very much, Elias, he said softly. It doesn't feel like it, I whispered, staring at the rusty key. Rose was a woman of secrets, Mr. Sterling said, and she was a woman who believed in the long game. Do not judge a book by its cover, and do not judge a key by its rust. He stood up and extended his hand. Here is the deed to the property. The taxes are paid for the next 10 years. The rest is up to you. I took the deed. I picked up the key. I put it in my pocket. It clinked against the cigarette butt I had picked up earlier. Trash and rust. That was my legacy. I left the building and walked out into the blinding midday sun. The city was loud and busy. People rushed past me, shouting into phones, chasing taxis, chasing money. I walked to the nearest bus stop. I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't go to the workshop. I took the bus to the harbor. The old harbor docks were on the edge of the city, a place where the industry had died decades ago. It was a graveyard of brick and steel. The air smelled of salt and rotting wood. Seagulls cried overhead, circling like vultures. I found a row of warehouses. Most of them had collapsed roofs or were boarded up with graffiti-covered plywood. I walked until I found number 4. It was a small, standalone structure made of red brick that had turned black with grime. The metal rolling door was dented and brown with rust. There was a smaller pedestrian door to the side. It looked abandoned. It looked worthless. I stood there for a long time. The wind from the ocean whipped at my face. I thought about turning around. I could sell the land. Maybe I'd get $50,000 for it. Enough to buy a new van for my restoration business. Enough to forget this humiliation. But then I remembered the music box. It is not broken. It is just stubborn. I pulled the key from my pocket. My hand was shaking. I inserted the key into the lock of the pedestrian door. It was stiff. I had to wiggle it. I had to be patient. Click! The lock turned. I pushed the door open. It groaned, a long, high-pitched shriek of metal against metal that echoed in the emptiness. Darkness greeted me. A smell rushed out, dry, musky, and ancient. It smelled like old paper and forgotten dreams. I stepped inside and fumbled for a light switch on the wall. I found a toggle and flipped it. A single row of industrial fluorescent lights flickered overhead. They buzzed angrily, then stabilized, casting a pale, sickly light over the room. My breath caught in my throat. I had expected an empty room, or a room full of garbage. I was wrong. The warehouse was packed from floor to ceiling. It was a labyrinth of shapes covered in white drop cloths, hundreds of them. They looked like ghosts standing in formation. Furniture, crates, statues. Near the entrance, a drop cloth had slipped off a chair. I walked over to it. I knew wood. I knew furniture. My heart skipped a beat. It was a Louis XIV armchair, but it was in terrible condition. The velvet was torn, the stuffing was spilling out, and one leg was snapped clean off. It was a ruin. I looked around. I pulled the sheet off a nearby stack. Frames. Dozens of picture frames. But the canvases were dark, covered in layers of soot and grime, unrecognizable. I moved deeper into the warehouse. It went on and on. Broken chandeliers, cracked porcelain vases, tables with water damage. It wasn't a treasure trove. It was a hospital. A hospital for broken things. "Why, Grandma?" I whispered to the silent room. "Why did you give me this?" I slumped down on a dusty crate, feeling the weight of the disappointment crush me. She had left me a junkyard. She had left me a lifetime of work with no reward. I put my head in my hands. Then I saw it. On the floor, near the crate I was sitting on, there was a small glimmer. I reached down. It was a brass plaque fallen from the side of the crate. I wiped the dust off with my thumb. It read, "Property of the estate of H. Thorne. Salvaged 1944, Paris." I froze. 1944, Paris. I looked at the crate again. It was nailed shut. I grabbed the crowbar that was leaning against the wall. With a grunt of effort, I pried the lid open. Straw packing material spilled out. I pushed it aside. Inside was a clock. An intricate golden mantel clock. The face was smashed, the hands were bent, but the craftsmanship was undeniable. And tucked into the back of the clock was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a note, written in Grandma's handwriting, but the ink was faded, the paper yellowed. For the one who has the eyes to see what others cannot. I looked at the endless rows of broken, dirty objects. Julian saw trash. Sophie saw dirt. I looked at the chair again. I didn't see the torn velvet. I saw the curve of the armrest, carved by a master. I saw the structure that was still sound underneath the damage. I stood up. The smell of cedar and varnish was faint, but it was there, buried under the dust. I wasn't rich. I was overwhelmed. But for the first time since she died, I didn't feel alone. I closed the door behind me, locking the world out. I took off my suit jacket and rolled up my sleeves. "Okay, Grandma," I said into the silence. "Let's see what you're hiding." The first night was the hardest. I didn't go home to my apartment. I couldn't bear the thought of packing my life into boxes yet. Instead, I stayed in the warehouse. I cleared a small space in the corner, near the pedestrian door where the draft wasn't as bad. I dragged 3 shipping blankets off a pile of old mirrors and made a nest on the concrete floor. It was cold. The kind of damp, seeping cold that settles into your bones and stays there. Outside, the harbor was alive. Foghorns moaned in the distance. The metal roof creaked as the temperature dropped. Rats scurried in the rafters, their tiny claws scratching against the wood. I lay there in the dark, staring up at the invisible ceiling. I questioned my sanity. Julian was probably drinking champagne in a first-class seat to Tokyo right now. Sophie was likely planning a renovation for her new Malibu villa, and I was sleeping on the floor of a condemned building, guarding a pile of broken furniture. "You're an idiot, Elias," I whispered to myself. But then the moonlight shifted. A beam of silver light cut through a high, grime-covered window. It landed on the Louis XIV chair I had examined earlier. In the moonlight, the rips in the velvet didn't look like damage. They looked like battle scars. The chair had a dignity to it. It had survived. It was still standing. I closed my eyes and listened to the ocean. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of falling. The next morning, the real work began. I drove my battered van to my apartment and packed my tools. Chisels, sanders, clamps, glues, varnishes. I packed my clothes, my coffee maker, and my radio. I gave my landlord notice. I was burning the bridge. There was no going back. I turned the front section of the warehouse into a living space. It was primitive. I set up a hot plate on a workbench. I hung a tarp to create a makeshift shower area using a hose connected to a utility sink in the corner. It wasn't comfortable, but it was mine. Then I started on the mountain. That was what I call the massive pile of inventory. It was a geological excavation. Every layer revealed something new. Day 3. I found a set of Victorian dining chairs. The wood was mahogany, deep and red, but the legs had been chewed by termites. I marked them. Restorable. Day 7. I uncovered a grand piano. It was missing keys and the soundboard was cracked. I ran my hand along the curve of its side. It was a Steinway, dated 1920. My heart ached for it. Major project. Day 10. I found a box of silver candlesticks, black with tarnish. Under the tarnish, I found the hallmark of a famous silversmith from London. I worked 14 hours a day. I swept dust that had been settling since the Cold War. I hauled bags of actual trash, rotting cardboard, rat nests, broken glass, out to the dumpster. My hands were constantly grey with grime. My back screamed in protest every night. But I was happy. It was a strange, quiet happiness. I was alone, but I was in conversation with the past. Every object had a voice. Every scratch told a story of an accident, a move, a careless child, or a violent event. My phone rang on the second Tuesday. It was Julian. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. "Hello?" "Elias!" Julian's voice was loud, competing with the sound of wind. "I can barely hear you. Where are you, in a cave?" "I'm at the warehouse," I said. "I moved in." There was a pause. "You what? You're living in that dump?" "It saves rent," I said. "And I'm cleaning it up." "Jesus, Elias, you really have hit rock bottom. Look, I'm calling from a yacht. I'm in the Mediterranean with some potential partners. The market is fluctuating, but I'm doubling down on the leverage. I need you to sign a waiver." "A waiver?" "Yeah, for the estate taxes. Sterling says we need all beneficiaries to sign off so I can access the secondary trust immediately. I'll email it to you. Just sign it and scan it back." "Julian, are you spending money you don't have yet?" I asked, looking at a cracked vase in my hand. "Don't lecture me, little brother. His voice hardened. I'm building an empire. You're playing with trash. Just sign the damn paper. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. He sounded manic. He sounded like a man running on a treadmill that was going too fast. 2 hours later, Sophie called. Elias, you have to come to the villa next weekend, she chirped. She sounded drunk, or high, or both. I'm throwing a rebirth party. It's going to be iconic. Everyone is coming. I can't, Sophie. I'm working. Working? On what? That creepy warehouse? She laughed. Oh, did you see my story? I bought the new Porsche. It matches the house perfectly. Heritage blue. That's great, Sophie, I said, feeling a heavy stone in my chest. Be careful with the money. It has to last. You sound just like Grandma, she snapped. Boring. Anyway, if you change your mind, come by. But dress better. No flannel shirts. She hung up. I put the phone down on the workbench. I felt a sudden wave of isolation. They were my family, but we were living on different planets. They were accelerating, burning bright and fast. I was slowing down, digging into the dirt. I turned on the radio. Classical music filled the warehouse. I picked up a piece of sandpaper and went back to work on the Victorian chair. The repetitive motion was soothing. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Smooth out the rough edges. Reveal the grain. It was 3 weeks in when I found the anomaly. I was clearing the back wall of the warehouse. It was the darkest section, farthest from the windows. There was a massive wall unit there, a library shelving system made of dark oak. It was huge, maybe 12 feet wide and 10 feet high. It was ugly. It was covered in a layer of soot so thick it looked like fur. It was filled with old water-damaged encyclopedias that disintegrated when I touched them. I decided to move it. I wanted to check the brick wall behind it for mold. I emptied the shelves. Then, I wedged my dolly under the base. I pushed. It didn't budge. I grunted and put my shoulder into it. Come on, I growled. Nothing. It felt like it was bolted to the floor. I got my flashlight and knelt down to inspect the base. I was looking for screws or bolts. I ran my fingers along the bottom molding. The wood was rot-resistant oak. It was solid. But as my fingers traced the decorative carving on the right side, I felt a groove. It wasn't a crack. It was too straight. I shone the light on it. It was a seam, a hidden panel. I pressed on it. Nothing happened. I tried sliding it. It slid to the left. Underneath the small wooden panel was a keyhole. A chill went up my spine. I stood up and patted my pocket. I always carried the rusty key, the one from the will reading, the one Julian had laughed at. I pulled it out. The clover-shaped head, the bent leaf. I knelt down again. My hand trembled slightly as I brought the key to the lock. The size looked right. The shape looked right. I inserted the key. It slid in smoothly, like a sword into a sheath. There was no resistance. It was as if the lock had been waiting for this key for 100 years. I turned it. Click! A solid, heavy mechanical sound. Then, a hiss of air. The entire bookshelf unit groaned. It didn't tip over. It swung outward. The whole structure was a door. A massive, heavy, hidden door. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet. The bookshelf swung open about 3 feet and stopped. Behind it was not a brick wall. It was a black void. The air that rushed out was different from the warehouse air. It didn't smell like dust or rot. It smelled of old paper, leather, and lavender? Grandma's perfume. I stood up, my heart pounding in my ears like a drum. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed slightly. No answer. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and stepped into the gap. I found a switch on the inner wall. I flipped it. A warm yellow glow illuminated the space. It was a room, a perfectly preserved study, completely sealed off from the rest of the warehouse. There were no windows. The walls were lined with glass-fronted cabinets. The floor was covered in a Persian rug that looked brand new. In the center of the room sat a heavy mahogany desk, clean and polished. I walked in slowly, afraid to touch anything. It felt like a shrine. On the walls, there were maps, old maps. Maps of Europe, maps of Asia, maps of cities that had been bombed into oblivion during the war. They were covered in pins and red strings. I approached the desk. On the center of the desk, there was a single leather-bound book, a journal. Next to it was a pair of white cotton gloves. I put on the gloves. I sat down in the leather chair behind the desk. It creaked familiarly. It was Grandma's chair. I remembered the sound from her house. She must have moved it here years ago. I opened the journal. The first page was dated October 14, 1955. The handwriting was Grandma's, but stronger, sharper than I remembered. My name is Rose Thorne. To the world, I am a housewife, a widow, a gardener. But these are masks. A woman needs masks to survive in a man's world. I turned the page. Today, I secured the shipment from Vienna. The fire in the opera house was a tragedy. But it was also an opportunity. They think the Angel of Music statue was destroyed. It was not. I bought it from the salvage crew for the price of a used car. It is safe now. It is in the warehouse. One day, when the world is ready to appreciate beauty again, it will return. I read on. My eyes widened, page after page, year after year. She wasn't just hoarding junk. She was saving history. There were entries about paintings smuggled out of East Berlin. Entries about tapestries rescued from flooded basements in Venice. Entries about rare manuscripts bought from desperate aristocrats. She was a rescuer. She was the silent curator. I had heard of this name in my restoration classes. The silent curator was a myth, an anonymous figure who had saved hundreds of artworks during the chaos of the mid-20th century. Museums had searched for this person for decades. It was Grandma. My grandmother was a legend. I flipped to the end of the journal. The last entry was dated 2 months before she died. The handwriting was shaky. I am tired. The collection is vast, but it is damaged. It needs a healer. Julian sees dollar signs. Sophie sees mirrors. They cannot be trusted with this. They would sell the soul of these items for a quick profit. The collection needs Elias. He is quiet. He listens. He has the hands. But he is weak. He does not believe in himself. I have to force him to see his own value. I will give him the rust so he can find the gold underneath. Tears blurred my vision. A tear dropped onto the white cotton glove. She hadn't abandoned me. She had chosen me. She had entrusted me with her life's work. This warehouse wasn't a junkyard. It was a vault. And I was the keeper. I stood up and looked around the room with new eyes. The cabinets on the walls. I walked over to one. Inside were small labeled boxes. Fabergé, 1912. Ming Dynasty. Jade. Letters from Hemingway. This room alone was worth a fortune. But the warehouse outside? The mountain. That was the real challenge. Those were the wounded soldiers waiting for triage. Suddenly, a loud banging on the metal rolling door outside made me jump. Bang, bang, bang.
Elias, open up. I know you're in there.
It was a voice I didn't recognize. Rough, aggressive. I quickly closed the journal. I stepped out of the secret room and pushed the heavy bookshelf back into place until the latch clicked. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I walked through the dark warehouse to the small pedestrian door. "Who is it?" I shouted. "City Inspector," the voice yelled back. "Open the door or we cut the lock." My stomach dropped. I opened the door. A man in a neon yellow vest stood there, holding a clipboard. Behind him was a police officer. "Elias Thorne?" the inspector asked, chewing on a toothpick. "Yes." "We received a complaint about squatting and unsafe conditions in a condemned commercial structure," he said, looking past me into the gloomy warehouse. "We need to inspect the premises. If this building isn't up to code, we're shutting it down. Tonight."
Complaint? I asked. Who made a complaint?
The inspector smirked. Anonymous tip. Said there was a fire hazard. Said a crazy guy was living in here with a bunch of trash. I knew instantly. It wasn't a stranger, Julian, or Sophie. They wanted me out. They wanted me to fail. "Come in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you won't find trash. You'll find inventory." The inspector stepped in, shining his flashlight around. The beam hit the mountain of furniture. "Looks like a fire trap to me," he muttered. He pulled out a red tag. "I'm gonna have to condemn this, son. You have 24 hours to vacate." "No," I said. "Wait. 24 hours," he repeated. "Or the bulldozers come for the safety demolition." He slapped the red sticker on the doorframe. I stood there as they walked away. I had just found the greatest secret of my life, and now I had 24 hours to save it from being destroyed. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Not my family. I needed a lawyer. But not Mr. Sterling. He was too old, too connected to Julian. I needed someone hungry. I looked at the red sticker. The panic was rising. But underneath it, something else was waking up. A stubbornness. The same stubbornness that fixed the music box. "You wanna fight?" I whispered into the cold night air. "Okay, let's fight." The red sticker on the doorframe looked like a wound. Condemned. I stared at it until the letters blurred. 24 hours. That was all the time I had before the city locked me out. Before they bulldozed Grandma's legacy. Before they buried the truth under a pile of rubble. I needed a miracle. Or more specifically, I needed a lawyer who hated bullies. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I scrolled past Mom and Dad, numbers that hadn't been answered in years, and found the name I was looking for. Maya Lin. We went to high school together. She was the girl who organized the student walkout when the cafeteria stopped serving vegetarian options. She was fierce, brilliant, and terrifying. Last I heard, she was running her own small practice out of a converted garage, fighting eviction cases for low-income families. It was 8 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. "This better be good, Elias," she said. Her voice was sharp, fast. "I'm in the middle of a brief and I'm eating cold pizza." "I need help," I said. "Tonight, right now." "I don't do criminal defense," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "Are you in jail?" "No, but I'm about to lose everything. Julian is trying to crush me." There was a pause.
Maya knew Julian.
Everyone in our town knew Julian. In high school, he had tried to get her expelled for writing an article about the football team's funding. "I'm listening," she said. 30 minutes later, the roar of a motorcycle engine cut through the silence of the docks. Maya pulled up to the warehouse door on a vintage Honda. She took off her helmet, shaking out her short black hair. She wore a leather jacket over a business suit. She looked like a warrior. "Show me," she said. I led her to the red tag. She squinted at it, using the flashlight on her phone. "Code violation 304. Structural instability. Fire hazard," she read. She snorted. "Classic. This is a boilerplate eviction tactic. Developers use it all the time to clear out tenants so they can flip the land." "Can you stop it?" I asked. "Maybe," she said, walking inside. She looked around at the mountain of furniture, the dust, the chaos. "But Elias, honestly, this place is a fire hazard. Look at all this wood. If a spark hits this, it goes up like a Roman candle. The judge isn't going to look kindly on a hoarder's nest." "It's not hoarding," I said. "It's history." "It looks like junk," she said bluntly. "I can file an emergency injunction to stay the demolition, but we need a valid reason. Sentimental value doesn't work in court." I took a deep breath. I had to trust her. "Come with me," I said. I led her to the back of the warehouse. I checked the windows to make sure no one was watching. Then I pulled the key from my pocket. I slid the bookshelf open. Maya gasped. I led her into the secret study. The warm light hit the leather books, the maps, the clean desk. It was a different world.
"What is this?"
she whispered, running her hand along a map of 1940s Paris. "Ranma Rose wasn't just a gardener," I said. I opened the journal to the page about the angel of music. She was the silent curator. "This isn't a warehouse, Maya. It's a vault. There are millions of dollars worth of art and history hidden under those drop cloths out there." Maya looked at me, her eyes wide. She looked at the journal. She looked at the key in my hand. "Julian doesn't know?" she asked. "No, he thinks it's trash. He wants to sell the land for a shopping mall." Maya's expression changed. The tiredness vanished. Her eyes narrowed, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "He wants to bulldoze a cultural heritage site to build a mall," she said. "Oh, I am going to enjoy this." She slammed her hand on the desk. "Okay, here is the plan. We can't prove the art value overnight. That takes appraisals. But we can prove that this structure is historically significant. I saw the brickwork outside. This building is from the 1920s maritime boom. I can file for an emergency landmark status review. It puts a freeze on any demolition for at least 30 days. 30 days? I asked. It's a stalling tactic, she said, pulling a laptop out of her backpack. But it buys us time. In those 30 days, you need to clean this place up. You need to make it look like a gallery, not a fire trap. If the fire marshal comes back and sees a museum in progress, he'll sign off. I can do that, I said. Good. Now make me some coffee. It's going to be a long night. We worked until the sun came up. Maya sat at Grandma's desk, typing furiously, calling judges clerks, citing obscure zoning laws. I was out in the warehouse, moving the most flammable materials away from the exits, clearing pathways, organizing the chaos. At 4 a.m., my body was aching, but my mind was clear. I was moving a stack of old newspapers when I found a small wooden box. It was heavy. I opened it. Inside was a set of silver carving tools. The handles were made of pearl. They were exquisite. Attached to the box was a note, "For the hands that heal." Grandma had left breadcrumbs everywhere. Every time I felt tired, I found another piece of her. At 7 a.m., the sun broke over the harbor. The grey light filtered through the dirty windows. Maya walked out of the secret room. She looked exhausted, but triumphant. I got the temporary stay," she said, waving a piece of paper she had printed on a portable printer. "Judge Holloway signed it electronically 5 minutes ago. He loves old buildings. The demolition order is suspended, pending a hearing next month." I slumped against a crate, wiping sweat from my forehead. "We did it." "For now," Maya said, "but the wolves are at the door." We heard a car pull up outside. Tires crunched on gravel. "Speak of the devil," Maya muttered. I walked to the pedestrian door. Maya stood right behind me. I opened it. A sleek black Mercedes was parked next to Maya's motorcycle. Julian stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a movie villain. Behind him was the city inspector from yesterday. Julian smiled when he saw me. "Morning, Elias. Packing up?" "No," I said. Julian took off his sunglasses. "Don't make this hard, brother. The bulldozers are scheduled for noon. I did you a favor. I found a buyer for the scrap metal. They'll haul it away for free." "You're too kind," I said.
"I'm trying to help you," Julian said, walking closer. "You're drowning, Elias. You have no money. This place is a liability. Just sign the deed over to me. I'll give you 10,000 cash. You can go on a trip. Start over."
10,000? I laughed. It was a dry, hollow laugh. "For 5 acres of waterfront property?" "It's condemned property," Julian snapped. "It's worthless." "Not anymore." Maya stepped out from behind me. Julian blinked. "Maya Lynn? What are you doing here? Is there a protest nearby?" "Good to see you too, Julian," Maya said sweetly. She handed the paper to the inspector. "This is a court order issued by Judge Holloway. This building is now under review for historical landmark status. Any attempt to alter, damage, or demolish the structure is a federal offense punishable by fines and jail time." The inspector looked at the paper. He paled. He looked at Julian. "Thorn, this looks legit. I can't touch this building." Julian's face went red. The vein in his neck pulsed. He snatched the paper, read it, and crumpled it in his fist. "Landmark status?" he hissed. "Are you insane? It's a shed." "It's a rare example of 1920s industrial architecture," Maya recited. "And my client, Mr. Elias Thorn, is currently restoring the interior to preserve local history." Julian looked at me. His eyes were cold. There was no brotherly love there, only calculation and rage. "You think you're clever," Julian said, his voice low. "You think hiding behind a cheap lawyer and a judge will save you?" "It's my property, Julian," I said. "Go home." Julian stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale scotch. "You have no idea what you're doing," he whispered. "I need this land, Elias. I leveraged the Thorn Holdings shares against this development deal. If I don't break ground in 3 months, the bank calls the loan. I lose everything." I stared at him. "You gambled Grandma's company?" "I was expanding it," he shouted, losing his composure. "I was trying to be more than just her grandson. But you're just a parasite. You always were." He poked a finger into my chest. "I will bury you in legal fees," Julian threatened. "I will report every code violation. I will cut off the power. I will make your life a living hell until you beg me to take this key." He turned and stormed back to his car. "We're leaving," he yelled at the inspector. The inspector scurried after him. The Mercedes peeled away, kicking up a cloud of dust. I stood there, watching them go. My heart was hammering. But for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from clarity. Julian wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. He had bet the farm and lost, and now he needed my inheritance to cover his mistakes. "He's scared," Maya said, standing beside me. "Yes," I said. "He is." "He's going to come back harder," she warned. "He's going to play dirty." I reached into my pocket and touched the rusty key. "Let him come," I said. I looked back into the warehouse. The sun was rising higher, sending shafts of light onto the dusty furniture. For a second, the dust looked like gold dust. I wasn't just a restorer anymore. I was a protector. "Maya," I said, "do you know anyone who knows about art restoration? I think I need a team." Maya smiled. "I might know a guy. He's an ex-forger, just got out of parole. But he's the best." "Perfect," I said. I looked at the horizon. The storm was coming. But Grandma had left me an umbrella. I turned back to the warehouse. Time to get to work. The address Maya gave me was for a place called the Inkwell. It sounded like a library. It was actually a tattoo parlor in the gritty part of the East End, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a liquor store. "Wait here," Maya said, parking her motorcycle on the sidewalk, "and let me do the talking. Silas doesn't like people." "Who is he?" I asked, clutching the canvas bag I had brought with me. "Silas Vane. He was the youngest person ever admitted to the Royal Academy of Arts, and the youngest person ever expelled," Maya explained, removing her helmet. "He got caught painting a lost Vermeer that fooled 3 experts. He did 2 years for fraud. He's brilliant, but he's bitter." We walked inside. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale cigarette smoke. The buzzing of a tattoo needle was the only sound. In the back, a man was hunched over a customer's arm. He was thin, with wiry muscles and sleeves of tattoos covering his own skin. He had messy, graying hair and glasses that were taped at the bridge. "We're closed," he grunted without looking up. "Hello, Silas," Maya said, leaning against the doorframe. Silas paused. The buzzing stopped. He looked up, his eyes narrowing behind the thick lenses. "Maya Lin, the patron saint of lost causes. If you're here to ask me to testify in another copyright case, the answer is no." "I'm not here for court," Maya said. "I'm here for a job, a restoration job." Silas nodded. He wiped the ink off the customer's arm. "I don't do restoration. I do ink. It pays better, and the clients don't ask about provenance." "This is different," I spoke up. Silas looked at me for the first time. His gaze was dissecting. He looked at my hands, stained with varnish and wood blue. He looked at my cheap shoes. "Who's the Boy Scout?" Silas asked Maya. "Elias Thorne," I said, stepping forward. "I own a warehouse at the docks. I have a collection that needs triage." "A collection?" Silas laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "What do you have? Some water-damaged IKEA cabinets? A few prints of dogs playing poker?" "I have the angel of music," I said quietly. The room went dead silent. The customer in the chair looked confused, but Silas froze. "The angel of music," Silas repeated slowly. "The bronze statue by Rodin's student, Camille Claudel? The one destroyed in the Vienna Opera House fire of 1955. "It wasn't destroyed," I said. "It was salvaged. It's in my warehouse. But it has smoke damage and heavy oxidation. I need someone who knows how to clean bronze without stripping the patina." Silas stared at me. "You're lying." I reached into my canvas bag. I didn't pull out the statue. It was too heavy. I pulled out a small framed sketch. It was a study of a hand drawn in charcoal. The signature in the corner was faint but legible. C. Claudel. I placed it on his tattoo table, right next to the inkpots. Silas picked it up. His hands, previously rough and dismissive, suddenly became gentle. He adjusted his glasses. He held the paper up to the light. He looked at the stroke weight, the texture of the paper. "This is real," he whispered. "The shading, the aggression in the lines. This is real." He looked at me, and the cynicism in his eyes cracked just a little. "Where did you get this?" "My grandmother," I said. "There is more, a lot more. But I have 30 days before the city tries to bulldoze the building. I need a lead conservator. I can't pay you market rate, but I can give you full access to a collection that the world thinks is lost." Silas looked at the sketch, then at his tattoo gun, then at me. "I need coffee," he said. "And I need to see this warehouse." The team was small, but it was ours. Maya handled the paperwork, fighting a guerrilla war against the city council. Silas handled the inventory and the chemistry. I handled the heavy lifting and the wood. We established a routine. The warehouse became a hive of activity. We hung industrial plastic sheeting to create a clean room in the center of the cavernous space. We brought in dehumidifiers to suck the moisture out of the air. The sound of the machines humming became the heartbeat of the building. Silas was a tyrant, but a genius. "No, no, no," he yelled at me on the third day. I was scrubbing a grime-covered oil painting with a soapy cloth. "You're scrubbing it like it's a dirty dish? You are removing the varnish, you idiot!" He pushed me aside. He took a cotton swab, a Q-tip, and dipped it into a mixture of solvents he had brewed in a jar. "You don't scrub," he lectured, his face inches from the canvas. "You lift, you coax the dirt off, like this." He rolled the swab gently over a patch of black soot. The black lifted away, revealing a brilliant stroke of cerulean blue underneath. "It's a surgery," Silas muttered. "We are surgeons. Do not kill the patient." I learned. I watched his hands. I learned to mix solvents. I learned to identify wood rot by smell. We worked 18 hours a day. We ate takeout food sitting on crates. We slept on cots. And slowly, the mountain of trash began to reveal its secrets. We found a chest of drawers from the 17th century, hidden under a pile of old curtains. We found a set of Japanese samurai armor, rusted but complete, inside a crate marked kitchen supplies. But the biggest discovery wasn't an object. It was the feeling in the room. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was leading something. I wasn't just Julian's little brother. I was the captain of the Rusty Key. One rainy Tuesday, a week into the work, the metal rolling door rattled. "Delivery!" a voice called out. I wasn't expecting a delivery. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing there under a large black umbrella was Sophie. She looked out of place in the industrial wasteland of the docks. She was wearing white, a white cashmere coat, white boots, and holding a white clutch. She looked like an angel who had taken a wrong turn into hell. "Hello, Elias," she said, wrinkling her nose at the smell of low tide. "Can I come in? It's pouring." I stepped aside. "Careful where you step. There's dust." Sophie walked in. She looked around the warehouse, her eyes scanning the plastic sheets, the bright work lights, the smell of chemicals. "It smells like nail polish remover in here," she commented. "And are you sleeping on a cot? Elias, this is tragic." "What do you want, Sophie?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. I didn't offer her a seat. The only clean chairs were priceless antiques. She sighed and adjusted her coat. I came to check on you. Julian is spiraling. He's furious about the landmark status thing. He's threatening to sue you for incompetence. Let him try, I said. He says you're mentally unstable, Sophie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He wants to petition for power of attorney over you, to save you from yourself. A chill went down my spine. That was Julian's playbook, and if he couldn't beat you, he would declare you crazy. I'm fine, Sophie. As you can see, I'm working. Sophie walked over to a table where I had laid out some restored silverware. She picked up a silver fork, turning it over in her manicured hand. This is pretty, she said. Is it real silver? Sterling, I said. Mid-19th century. How much is it worth? About $200. For the fork? Her eyes flickered. And the whole set? Maybe 5,000? She bit her lip. She put the fork down a little too quickly. Elias, she said, her voice changing. It became softer, more like the sister I remembered from childhood, before the money ruined us. I need a favor. A favor? The villa, it needs work. The roof is leaking. And the taxes are insane. I didn't realize the property taxes on oceanfront property was so high. And my liquidity is a bit tied up right now. I looked at her. You spent the money, didn't you? I invested it, she snapped defensively. In my brand. But the returns take time. Look, I just need a loan. 50,000, just until my next sponsorship deal comes through. I don't have 50,000, Sophie. I have a warehouse full of broken things. But you have this, she gestured around. Sell something. Sell that creepy clock. Sell the silver. Julian says there's millions in here. Just sell one thing and give me a cut. Grandma would have wanted us to help each other. Grandma left this to me, I said firmly. Not to be sold, to be saved. Sophie's face hardened. The softness vanished. You're selfish, she spat. You always were, sitting in the corner, playing the victim. Now you have a gold mine and you're hoarding it like a dragon. You want to see us fail, don't you? I want you to stop living a lie, Sophie, I said gently. The money is gone. You need to get a job. A job? She laughed, a high, hysterical sound. I am a brand, Elias. I don't get a job. She spun around and marched to the door. You'll regret this, she said over her shoulder. When Julian comes for you, don't come crying to me. I won't help you. She slammed the small metal door behind her. I stood there listening to the rain hammer against the roof. I felt a pang of guilt. She was my sister after all. But then I looked at the silver fork she had touched. It was tarnished where her finger had pressed against it. Trouble? Silas asked, emerging from the clean room. He had a magnifying glass strapped to his head. Family, I said. The most expensive thing in the world. The attack happened 2 nights later. It wasn't subtle. I was asleep on my cot. Silas had gone home to his apartment. Maya was working late at her office. At 2 a.m., the lights in the warehouse flickered and died. The hum of the dehumidifiers stopped. Total silence. Then, total darkness. I sat up, grabbing my flashlight. Hello? Nothing. I walked to the fuse box near the entrance. I flipped the breakers. Nothing happened. I went outside. The street lights were on. The neighboring warehouses had power. I walked around to the side of the building where the main power line connected to the meter. The heavy copper cable had been severed. It wasn't an accident. It had been cut with bolt cutters. Panic set in. The warehouse relied on the climate control system. We had exposed fragile oil paintings. We had stripped the protective varnish off the wood. Without the dehumidifiers, the damp harbor air would rush in. Within 24 hours, the canvases would warp. Mold would bloom. The collection would die. I ran back inside. I called Silas. "They cut the power," I shouted into the phone. "The humidity is rising. It's already at 60%. "Damn it," Silas yelled. "Cover the paintings. Use the mylar sheets. I'm coming." I spent the next hour running through the dark warehouse with a flashlight in my mouth. I threw plastic sheets over the furniture. I wrapped the paintings in blankets. I was fighting an invisible enemy, moisture. I was sweating, tripping over crates, cursing Julian's name. He knew. He knew exactly how to hurt us without touching us. He didn't need to burn the place down. He just needed to let nature do the work. By the time Silas arrived, I was exhausted. "We need a generator," Silas said, looking at the hygrometer on the wall. "Humidity is at 65%. We have maybe 6 hours before the wood starts to swell." "I can't afford an industrial generator," I said, checking my bank account on my phone. "I have $300 left." "Then we need to sell something," Silas said grimly. "Now." "No," I said. "If we sell, they win. That's what they want. They want to force a liquidation." "Then what do we do, Elias?" Silas shouted, his voice echoing in the dark. "Watch it rot?" I paced the floor. Think. Think like Grandma. It's not broken, it's just stubborn. "We don't need electricity to dry the air," I said. "We need silica, desiccants." "We need tons of it," Silas said. "Where are you going to get a ton of silica gel at 3 a.m.? I looked at the corner of the warehouse, at a pile of crates labeled kitty litter. I ran over and ripped a bag open. It was the cheap stuff, clay-based. But some brands... I checked the label. Super absorbent silica crystals. "Grandma," I whispered.
She didn't have a cat.
I had always wondered why she had 50 bags of high-end cat litter stacked in the corner. "Silas!" I yelled. "Grab a shovel." We spent the rest of the night pouring hundreds of pounds of crystal cat litter into trays, buckets, and bowls. We placed them around the most sensitive artifacts. It was ridiculous. It was desperate. But it worked. By sunrise, the humidity gauge had dropped to 45%. Safe. I sat on the floor, covered in white dust, holding a bag of cat litter like a trophy. Silas sat opposite me, wiping his glasses. He started to laugh. "We just saved $1 million collection with cat toilets," he wheezed. I laughed too. I laughed until my ribs hurt. "Julian cut the cord," I said. But he forgot one thing. What? Grandma was prepared for everything. The next morning, the sun was bright. I called an electrician friend to fix the line, a favor I would have to pay back later. While I was outside supervising the repair, Silas called me from the clean room. His voice was shaking. "Elias, come here." I ran inside. Silas was standing in front of a large, shapeless object covered in a tarp. We had moved it to the center of the room yesterday to treat it for potential mold, but we hadn't uncovered it yet. I pulled the tarp back to check for moisture, Silas said. "Look." He pulled the heavy canvas away. There she was, the angel of music. She was bronze, life-sized. She stood on a pedestal of charred oak. Her wings were swept back, feathers detailed down to the finest quill. Her face was turned upward, mouth slightly open as if singing a silent note. But she was black, covered in soot, ash, and the grime of 70 years. Yet, where Silas had wiped a small patch on her cheek, the bronze glowed with a deep, rich gold-brown hue. It was magnificent. It was tragic. And she was holding something. In her hands, pressed against her chest, was a small sealed metal cylinder. It wasn't part of the original sculpture. It had been welded there, crudely, afterwards. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know," Silas said. "But look at the weld marks. They are fresh. Well, relatively. Maybe from the 80s. I stepped closer. I touched the cylinder. It was cold. "Grandma hid something inside the statue," I whispered. "Or," Silas said, "someone else did." I looked at the angel's face. She looked like she was guarding a secret with her life. "We need to open it," I said. "Not yet," Silas stopped my hand. "We focus on the surface. If we damage the statue trying to open that tube, we lose our landmark leverage. We clean her first. We reveal her. Then we see what she's holding." I nodded. He was right. Patience. But as I looked at the cylinder, I felt a strange vibration, a sense of foreboding. Grandma had saved the statue from a fire. But maybe she didn't just save it for art's sake. Maybe she saved it because it was a carrier. "Julian is coming back," I said, staring at the angel. "And when he sees this, he won't stop at cutting wires." "Let him come," Silas said, picking up his tools. "I have a blowtorch now." We went back to work, but the air in the warehouse had changed. We weren't just restorers anymore. We were detectives, investigating a mystery that spanned decades. And the clock was ticking. 20 days left. The angel of music was waking up. For 3 days, Silas and I worked in shifts. We used cotton swabs dipped in a solution of sodium citrate and distilled water. It was a painstaking process. We moved millimeter by millimeter, lifting the black shroud of soot that had covered her for 70 years. It was intimate work. I knew every curve of her bronze fingers. I knew the arch of her neck. As we cleaned her, the metal beneath revealed itself not as a flat brown, but as a living surface. It had hints of green, gold, and deep chestnut. "She's crying," I said on the 4th morning. I was cleaning her face. There was a streak of lighter patina running from her left eye down to her jawline. It wasn't a flaw. The artist, Camille Claudel, had chemically treated the bronze to create a permanent tear. "It's a masterpiece," Silas murmured, stepping back to wipe his glasses. "The emotion, it's raw. If this hits the auction block, it breaks records. 50 million, maybe more." "She's not for sale," I reminded him. "Everything is for sale, Elias," Silas said, though his voice lacked its usual cynicism. "It's just a matter of who pays the price." We were high on the fumes of discovery. The warehouse looked different now. We had cleared the junk. The mountain was organized into neat rows of labeled artifacts. The center of the room was a gallery. The angel stood there, surrounded by the restored Louis XIV chair, the Victorian dining set, and the polished silver. It looked like a museum. "We're ready," Maya said, walking in with a clipboard. "The landmark inspection is tomorrow at 10 a.m. If we pass, the building gets temporary protected status. Julian can't touch a brick." I felt a surge of pride. We had done it. Then the pedestrian door opened. I expected Julian, or the police. Instead, a young man in a bike messenger uniform walked in. "Delivery for Elias Thorne," he said, bored. He handed me a thick manila envelope. I signed for it. My hands were trembling slightly. Legal documents never brought good news. I opened it. Maya leaned over my shoulder to read. Her breath hitched. Oh no. What is it? I asked. The legal jargon swam before my eyes. Plaintiff, defendant, motion for emergency relief. It's not an eviction notice, Maya said, her voice turning cold. It's a petition for involuntary conservatorship. I stared at her. What does that mean? It means Julian isn't suing the warehouse, Maya said, looking at me with pity. He's suing you. She pointed to a paragraph. The petitioner, Julian Thorne, alleges that the respondent, Elias Thorne, is suffering from acute mental instability, hoarding disorder, and delusions of grandeur. The respondent is living in squalor, endangering his own health and dissipating family assets on worthless refuse. The petitioner seeks immediate legal guardianship over the respondent's person and estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. He wants to own me? I whispered. He wants to declare you incompetent, Maya said angrily. If a judge grants this, Julian gets control of your bank accounts, your decisions, and this property. He can sign the deed over to himself and you can't stop him. He says I'm crazy, I said, looking around at my cot, the hot plate, the bags of cat litter. To an outsider, Silas said from the shadows, this does look a bit eccentric. I sank onto the restored Louis XIV chair. The velvet was soft, but I felt like I was sitting on ice. He doesn't want the land, I realized. He wants to erase me. He wants to make me a child again. We fight this, Maya said, pulling out her phone. I need to file a counter motion. I need character witnesses. You need me to talk to him, I said. No, Maya warned. Do not talk to him. He's building a case. Anything you say can be used to prove you're unstable. I have to, I said, standing up. He's my brother. I have to look him in the eye. I agreed to meet them at Le Jardin, the most expensive restaurant in the city. It was neutral ground. Or rather, it was their ground. I wore my only suit, the black funeral suit. I had brushed the sawdust off, but it still smelled faintly of turpentine. Julian and Sophie were already seated at a corner table. They looked perfect. Julian in navy blue, Sophie in silk. They looked like the winners of life's lottery. When I approached, Julian stood up. He didn't smile. He looked concerned, deeply, performatively concerned. Elias, he said, gesturing to the chair. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. You look thin. I'm working hard, I said, sitting down. I didn't touch the napkin. We're worried about you, Eli, Sophie said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her palm was soft and cold. We saw the photos. What photos? Julian slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were photos of me sleeping on the floor. Photos of me digging through dumpsters for supplies. Photos of me talking to myself, or rather, talking to the furniture, that had been taken with a long-range lens. You're being watched, I said, looking up at him. We hired a private investigator for your own safety, Julian said smoothly. Elias, look at these. This isn't the behavior of a sane man. You're living in a condemned ruin. You're associating with criminals. That tattoo artist Vane is a convicted felon. He's a genius, I said. He's a criminal, Julian corrected. And Maya Lin is an obstructionist radical. They are using you, Elias.
They are feeding your delusions so they can bill you for hours you can't afford.
They are my friends, I said. We are your family, Sophie cried out, a little too loud. People at nearby tables turned to look. We are the only ones who actually care if you live or die. Mom and Dad would be heartbroken to see you like this. That hit me, the mention of our parents. If Mom and Dad were here, I said quietly, they would ask why you gambled the company away. Julian's eyes hardened. The mask of concern slipped for a fraction of a second. I am trying to save the company, he hissed. And I need that land to do it. But this isn't about the land anymore, Elias. It's about you. You are sick. You have hoarding disorder. It's a recognized condition. We have a doctor ready to evaluate you. He pushed a paper towards me. Sign this, Julian said. It's a voluntary admission to the Whispering Pines Wellness Center. It's a resort, really. Beautiful grounds, therapists, good food. You go there for 30 days. Rest. Get your head straight. And while I'm there, I asked, what happens to the warehouse? We'll handle it, Sophie said quickly. We'll hire a professional cleaning crew. We'll catalog everything. If there's anything of value, we'll keep it. The rest? Well, it's a health hazard. You'll bulldoze it, I said. We will liquidate the assets to pay for your treatment, Julian said. It's for your own good. I looked at the paper. Voluntary admission. It was a trap. If I signed, I was admitting I was sick. If I didn't sign, they would drag me to court and force me. I looked at Julian. He was eating a steak. He cut the meat with surgical precision. He was so confident. He had always been the smart one, the strong one. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was crazy. Who chooses to live in a warehouse with rats? Who thinks a rusty key is a gift? I just wanted to make Grandma proud, I whispered. Grandma was senile, Elias, Julian snapped. She was a hoarder too. That's why she left it to you. Like calls to like. She knew you were the only one pathetic enough to keep her garbage. The words hung in the air. Pathetic. I looked down at my hands. They were rough, calloused, stained with walnut stain. But then I remembered the angel. I remembered the tear on her face. It's not broken. It's just stubborn. I stood up. I'm not signing, I said. Julian put down his knife. Then we will see you in court on Monday. And Elias, when the judge sees these photos, you won't just lose the warehouse. You'll lose your freedom. We will put you away for a long time. Enjoy your steak, Julian, I said. I turned and walked out. I felt small. I felt terrified. But I didn't look back. I returned to the warehouse in a daze. Silas and Maya were waiting. They saw my face and knew it went badly. He's going to bury me, I said, leaning against the cold bronze of the angel. He has photos. He has money. He has the narrative. Narratives can be changed, Maya said fiercely. How? I asked. To the world, I'm a guy with a rusty key and a pile of junk. I looked up at the angel. She held the cylinder in her hands. Grandma, I said to the statue, if you have any more secrets, now would be a good time. I looked at Silas. Open it, I said. The cylinder? Silas asked. We agreed to wait. We don't have time, I said. If they declare me incompetent on Monday, everything freezes. We need a weapon, now. Silas nodded. He grabbed his portable Dremel tool with a diamond cutting wheel. Clear the area, he commanded. I stood back. Maya held her breath. The high-pitched whine of the saw filled the silent warehouse. Sparks flew like fireworks, bouncing off the bronze chest of the angel. Silas was careful. He cut along the well line, sweat dripping down his nose. It took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 years. Clang! The metal cap of the cylinder fell to the floor. Silas turned off the saw. He reached into the hollow tube with a pair of long tweezers. There's something in here, he whispered. He pulled it out. It wasn't a paper. It was a plastic bag, vacuum sealed. Inside the bag were two things: a small black cassette tape and a thick leather-bound ledger. I took the bag. I tore it open. The ledger was old. I opened it. It wasn't an art catalogue. It was an accounting book. The header read, Thorn Industries, Unofficial Accounts, 1970 to 1990. I scanned the pages. My eyes widened.
What is it? Maya asked.
Grandma kept records, I said, my voice shaking. Of the business, my grandfather's business. Julian always said Grandpa was a brilliant developer. I pointed to a line item. Bribe to City Council, zoning permit, $50,000. Another line. Payment to arsonist, insurance fraud, warehouse district, $10,000. Grandpa wasn't a developer, I said, feeling sick. He was a crook. He burnt down buildings to clear land cheaply. That's how he built the empire. That's how Julian got his start, Maya realized. The seed money. I picked up the cassette tape. It was labeled For Elias. I ran to my work table. I had an old boombox I used for the radio. I shoved the tape in and pressed play. A hiss of static. Then Grandma's voice, strong, clear, younger than I remembered. Elias, if you are listening to this, it means you found the angel, and it means the vultures are circling. I closed my eyes. It was like she was in the room. I loved your grandfather, but he was a greedy man. He built our fortune on ash. I spent my life trying to redeem that money by saving beauty. I bought the art to balance the scales. A pause on the tape, the sound of a match being struck. Julian is like him. He has the same hunger. He thinks money is the only truth. He will try to take this from you. He will tell you that you are weak, that you are nothing. But listen to me, my sweet boy. You are the only one who is whole. You fix things. They only know how to break them. The ledger in your hand is your shield. It proves that the Thorn legacy Julian is so proud of is built on crimes. If he tries to hurt you, if he tries to take the sanctuary, show him the book. He won't want the world to know that his empire is a lie. Be brave, Elias. The key didn't just open a door, it opened the truth. The tape clicked off. Silence. I looked at the ledger. It was dynamite. If I released this, the Thorn name would be mud. Julian's investors would flee. He would be ruined. Not just bankrupt, socially destroyed. You have him, Maya said softly. This is leverage. If he proceeds with the conservatorship, you release the ledger. Mutually assured destruction. It destroys the family name, I said. Sophie too. They are trying to put you in a mental institution, Elias, Silas said. They declared war. You just found the nuke. I ran my hand over the cover of the ledger. It felt heavy. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. See you in court. Don't be late. Bring a toothbrush. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the angel. Her face was clean now. She looked fierce. I wasn't the little brother anymore. Maya, I said, my voice steady. Draft a new motion. What kind? A summons, I said. Invite Julian to the warehouse, tonight. Tell him I'm ready to surrender. Surrender? Silas asked, confused. No, I smiled, and it was a cold, sharp smile. I'm going to give him a private viewing of the collection. I picked up the ledger. It's time for a family reunion. The storm arrived before they did. It started as a low growl in the distance, vibrating through the metal floorboards of the warehouse. Then came the wind, whistling through the gaps in the brickwork like a chorus of ghosts.
The sky turned a bruised purple, heavy with rain. Inside, I had set the stage. We turned off the main overhead fluorescents. We used only the portable gallery lights, clamping them to the rafters. They cast focused, dramatic beams on the artifacts we had restored. The Victorian chair, the silver set, and in the center, dominating the space, the angel of music. She glowed. The gold-brown bronze seemed to hold its own light. She looked ready to take flight. On a small table in front of the statue, I placed two things: the surrender papers Julian wanted me to sign, and the black leather ledger. "They're here," Maya said, peering through the slat of the pedestrian door. "And they brought the lawyer." "Let them in," I said. I stood next to the angel. I didn't sit. I wanted to be standing when the world ended. The door opened. The wind rushed in, blowing dust across the floor. Julian entered first. He shook his umbrella aggressively, sending droplets flying. He was dressed for a victory lap: a sharp charcoal suit, a silk tie. Sophie followed, looking nervous, clutching her coat tight around her neck. Behind them was a man I didn't know, their lawyer, presumably. Julian stopped. He looked around the room. He blinked. He expected a dump. He expected piles of garbage and a brother cowering in a sleeping bag. Instead, he walked into a sanctuary. The lighting was theatrical. The silence was heavy. The air smelled of lemon oil and beeswax, not rot. "What is this?" Julian asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Welcome to the gallery," I said calmly. Julian's eyes scanned the room. They landed on the angel. His jaw tightened. He recognized quality when he saw it, even if he didn't understand art. He saw the size. He saw the condition. He saw the dollar signs. You found this?" Sophie whispered, walking toward the statue. She reached out a hand. "Don't touch," Silas said, stepping out from the shadows. He crossed his arms, looking like a guard dog. Julian recovered his composure. He sneered. "So, you polished some old statues. Very nice, Elias. It makes the liquidation easier. Does this mean you're ready to sign?" He walked to the small table. He saw the papers. "Good," he said, reaching for a pen inside his jacket. "You made the right choice. No need for court. We get you help, we sell this scrap, and we move on." "I'm not signing that, Julian," I said. Julian paused. He looked at me, annoyed. "We had a deal. You said surrender." "I said I wanted to show you the collection," I corrected him. "Specifically, one item." I pointed to the ledger. Julian looked down at the old, tattered book. "What is that? Another diary from Grandma?" "It's Grandpa's account book," I said, "from 1970 to 1990. Julian froze. His hand hovered over the table. "It details everything," I continued, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "The zoning bribes, the intimidation of tenants, and the fires." Sophie gasped. "Fires?" "The warehouse district fire of 1982, I said, looking directly at Julian. "The one that cleared the land for the Thorn Tower. Grandpa paid a man $10,000 to light the match. It's all here. Dates, names, amounts." Julian's face went pale. Not white, grey. The color of old ash. He snatched the book. He flipped the pages frantically. His eyes darted across the columns of numbers. This is fake," he stammered. "You forged this." "It's in his handwriting," I said. "And there's a tape. Grandma recorded a statement. It's with my lawyer."
Maya stepped forward. If you proceed with the conservatorship, Julian, if you try to take this warehouse, we release the ledger. We send copies to the press, the district attorney, and the historical society. It's ancient history, Julian spat, slamming the book shut. Statute of limitations. For the crimes, maybe, Maya said coolly. But for the reputation? Thorn Holdings is a public company. What happens to your stock price when the world learns the foundation is built on arson? What happens to your investors? Julian looked trapped. He looked at the book, then at me. His eyes were wide, feral. You would destroy the family? He whispered. Your own name? You tried to destroy me, I said. You tried to put me in a cage, Julian. You called me crazy because I wanted to save something beautiful. I'm just showing you the cost. I did it for us, Julian shouted. His voice cracked. The smooth corporate mask shattered completely. I did it because we are broke, Elias. We are drowning. He slammed his fist onto the table. The table shook. The company is leveraged to the hilt. I borrowed against everything. If I don't build that mall, the banks take it all. The house, the cars, the name. We will be nothing. He was panting. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Grandma knew, I said softly. That's why she gave me the key. She knew you couldn't stop. She wanted to save the one thing you couldn't sell. Give me the tape, Julian demanded. He lunged toward me. Silas stepped in, blocking him. Silas was smaller, but he held a heavy wrench in his hand. Back off. Julian, stop! Sophie screamed. She was crying now, real tears. It's over, just stop! It's not over, Julian yelled. He grabbed the ledger. This is mine. This is company property. Boom! A crack of thunder shook the entire building. It was so loud it felt like a bomb. The lights flickered. Then a tearing sound. Metal screeching against metal. We all looked up. The high windows near the roof, the ones we hadn't had time to reinforce, shattered inward. A torrent of water blasted into the warehouse. It wasn't just rain, it was a deluge. The wind howled through the broken glass, whipping the plastic sheets into a frenzy. The roof, Silas yelled. The patch isn't holding. Another crash. A section of the corrugated metal roof, weakened by rust and the storm, peeled back like the lid of a sardine can. Rain poured in. Sheets of grey, freezing water hammered down onto the gallery floor. It was hitting the angel. No! I screamed. I didn't think. I didn't look at Julian. I ran. I ran toward the statue. The water was acidic, dirty harbour rain. It would stain the bronze. It would ruin the weeks of work. Get the tops! I yelled to Silas. Silas was already moving, grabbing the heavy canvas sheets. Julian stood frozen, clutching the ledger to his chest. He looked up at the hole in the roof, water streaming down his expensive suit, ruining his silk tie. He looked paralyzed by the chaos.
Julian, help him! Sophie cried, pulling at his arm.
My car, Julian muttered, looking at the door. The hail. It will dent the car. Are you serious? Sophie screamed. Look at this place! I grabbed the tarp and threw it over the angel. The wind caught it, billowing it up like a sail. I struggled to pull it down. I was soaked instantly. The water was freezing. Maya, grab a corner, I shouted. Maya ran over, slipping on the wet concrete. She grabbed the grommet of the tarp. We fought the wind. It was a physical battle. The warehouse, which had been a sanctuary minutes ago, was now a wind tunnel. The paintings, Silas yelled. The Victorian set. The leak was spreading. Water was pooling on the floor. creeping toward the stacks of restored furniture. "Sophie!" I yelled, looking at my sister. She was standing by the door, shivering. "Grab the buckets! Under the leak! Now!" Sophie looked at her white coat. She looked at the dirty, oily water. Then she looked at me. She saw the desperation in my eyes. She threw her expensive white clutch on the floor. She ran to the stack of buckets we used for cleaning. "I'm coming!" she yelled. She grabbed a bucket and ran to the spot where the water was hitting the floor hardest. She slid, fell onto her knees in the mud, got up, and placed the bucket. "Julian!" she screamed at her brother. "Do something!" Julian stood there, clutching the ledger. The evidence of his grandfather's crimes. The thing that could ruin him. He looked at the book. He looked at the door. Then he looked at the angel, covered in the tarp, with me holding on to it for dear life. He took a step toward the door. "Julian!" I roared. "If you leave now, don't you ever come back!" He stopped. He looked at the ledger one last time. Then he did something I didn't expect. He shoved the ledger inside his jacket. He didn't come to help. He didn't leave. He walked over to a heavy wooden crate that was near the leak. He shoved it against the wall, trying to create a dam to divert the water away from the furniture. It wasn't much, but it was something. For 10 minutes we fought the storm. It was a chaotic ballet. Me and Maya holding the tarp over the statue. Silas moving paintings to the dry zone. Sophie running with buckets, her white coat turning grey and brown. Julian pushing crates. We were soaked. We were freezing. We were screaming instructions over the roar of the wind. And then, as quickly as it started, the wind died down. The rain turned from a torrent to a drizzle. The silence returned, but it was different. It was the silence of a battlefield. I let go of the tarp. My hands were cramping. I leaned against the base of the statue, gasping for air. Water dripped from my nose. The warehouse was a mess. There was a puddle spanning 30 feet across the floor. Debris from the roof was scattered everywhere. But the angel was dry. The paintings were safe. I looked around. Maya was wiping water off her face. Silas was checking the humidity gauge, looking grim. Sophie was sitting on the floor, her legs sprawled out. Her white coat was ruined. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. She looked like a raccoon. She looked up at me and started to laugh. It was a hysterical, exhausted laugh. "My coat," she wheezed. It's cashmere." "It's toast," Silas said, handing her a rag. Sophie took the rag and wiped her face, smearing the black makeup further. God, we look ridiculous. I looked at Julian. He was standing apart from us, near the door. He was wet. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He pulled the ledger out of his jacket. It was dry. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. "You win," he said. His voice was hollow. He walked over to the table and placed the ledger back down. "I can't fight the past," he said. "And I can't fight whatever this is." He gestured to the group of us, tired and dirty. He looked at the angel under the tarp. "Is it true?" he asked. "About Grandpa?" "Yes," I said. "Grandma spent her whole life trying to make up for it." Julian nodded slowly. He looked tired. Not the tired of a businessman who needs a nap. The tired of a man who has been carrying a weight he didn't understand for 40 years. "The bank is going to call the loan next week," Julian said quietly. "I can't stop it. Without the land, the collateral is gone. Thorn Holdings will file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy." He looked at Sophie. "We're going to lose the houses. the cars, everything. Sophie stopped laughing. She hugged her knees. I know. I'm sorry, Julian said. It was barely a whisper. He turned to the door. I should go. I have to call the lawyers. Julian, I said. He stopped, his hand on the latch. You don't have to lose everything, I said. He looked back, confused. You lose the company, I said. You lose the fake money, but you don't lose the family. Unless you walk out that door and keep acting like a stranger. Julian stared at me. His eyes were red. I don't know how to be anything else, he said. Learn, I said, like I did. He stood there for a long moment. The rain tapped gently on the roof. Then he nodded, a sharp, jerky nod. He opened the door and walked out into the night. I listened to his car engine start. It didn't speed away this time. It drove off slowly. I slumped down to the floor next to Sophie. He's gone, Sophie whispered. He'll be back, I said. He has nowhere else to go. I looked at the warehouse. It was damaged. The roof needed a major repair. The floor was flooded. We had lost days of work. But we had won the war. Okay, Silas said, clapping his hands. Enough sentimental garbage. We have a humidity crisis. Get the mops. I looked at Silas and smiled. Yes, boss, I said. I stood up. My body ached. But as I picked up a mop, I felt lighter than air. The ledger sat on the table, a heavy black book. I didn't need to open it. It had done its job. I looked at the angel. We had saved her from the fire, and now we had saved her from the flood. You're a tough old girl, I whispered to the statue. I started mopping the floor. The water was dirty, but in the reflection, I could see the lights above. We were still standing. The morning after the storm, the warehouse looked like a shipwreck that had washed ashore. Sunlight streamed through the hole in the roof, illuminating the puddle that stretched across the concrete floor. It was silent, except for the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water falling from a bent rafter into a plastic bucket. I sat on a crate, holding a mug of lukewarm coffee. My hands were blistered. My back felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. Silas was asleep on the floor, using a roll of bubble wrap as a pillow. Maya was slumped over the desk in the office, snoring softly. And Sophie? I looked over at the pile of Persian rugs in the dry corner. Sophie was curled up there, buried under 3 wool blankets. She was still wearing her ruined white designer boots. Her mascara was smeared across her cheek like war paint. She looked peaceful. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she was posing for a camera. She just looked like my sister. I stood up quietly and walked over to the angel of music. I pulled back the corner of the tarp. She was dry. The bronze face stared back at me, stoic and calm. She had survived the fire in Vienna. She had survived the dark years in the crate. She had survived the storm. We made it, I whispered. But as I looked at the damage around the room, the wet cardboard, the debris, the mud, I knew the hardest part wasn't the storm. It was what came next. Julian was gone, and the deadline for the landmark inspection was 48 hours away. By noon, the news broke. Maya woke up and checked her phone. She let out a low whistle. Elias, she called out. Come see this. I walked over. On her screen was a breaking news alert from the Financial Times. Real estate giant crumbles. Thorn Holdings files for bankruptcy protection. The article detailed the collapse. Over-leveraged assets. High-risk loans called in by creditors. The CEO, Julian Thorn, was reportedly under investigation by the SEC for irregularities in financial reporting. He did it, I said, staring at the headline. He actually filed. He didn't have a choice, Maya said. Without the land deal, the house of cards fell down. Where is he? I asked. No comment from his representatives, Maya read. His penthouse at the Millennium Tower has been seized by the bank. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I should have felt triumphant. Julian had bullied me, mocked me, and tried to have me committed. He was the villain of the story. But I didn't feel like a winner. I just felt sad. I remembered the Julian who used to teach me how to tie my shoelaces before he went to business school and learned how to tie a noose around his soul. I have to find him, I said. Elias, focus, Silas snapped, walking past with a broom. We have an inspection in 2 days. The roof is open to the sky. The floor is a swamp. If the inspector sees this, we don't get the landmark status. We get condemned again. Silas is right, Maya said gently. You can't save Julian right now. You have to save the legacy. I looked at the hole in the roof. I looked at the headline on the phone. We need money for the roof repair, I said. Fast. We have no money, Silas reminded me. We spent the last cash on the cat litter. I have something, a voice said. We turned. Sophie was sitting up on the pile of rugs. Her hair was a bird's nest. She looked terrible. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She tossed it to me. I caught it. It was heavy. I opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, a solitaire, at least 3 carats. It blazed in the dim light. That's the engagement ring, Sophie said, her voice raspy from sleep. From that tech CEO I dated last year, the one who dumped me via text. Sophie, I said, this is worth enough to fix a roof, she said, standing up and stretching. She winced as her stiff muscles protested. Sell it, pawn it, I don't care. Why? I asked. She looked around the warehouse. She looked at the bucket she had placed last night to catch the leak. Because, she said, looking me in the eye, last night was the first time in 10 years I actually felt useful. I'm tired of being a decoration, Elias. I want to be structure. She walked over to a table where a stack of dirty silver platters sat. She picked up a polishing cloth. Besides, she muttered, scrubbing at a spot of tarnish. If I'm going to be poor, I might as well hang out with the family. At least the furniture here has class. I smiled. It was a small, genuine smile. Maya, I said, handing her the ring. Go to the jewelry district. Get the best price you can. Silas, call the roofers. The expensive ones who work fast. On it, Maya said, grabbing her helmet. And me? I asked myself. You, Silas said, pointing to the angel. You finish the centerpiece. She needs to shine. The next 48 hours were a blur of noise and activity. The roofers arrived, a crew of burly men who patched the metal and sealed the leaks before the sun set. The sound of their nail guns was like music. Inside, we were a machine. Sophie surprised us all. She had an eye for arrangement. She didn't know history, but she knew drama. She arranged the lighting. She draped velvet cloth over the crates to create pedestals. She grouped the objects by color and texture. Move that chair to the left, she commanded Silas. It clashes with the tapestry. We need a narrative flow. Silas grumbled. I take orders from art historians, not Instagram models. Just do it, tattoo man, Sophie shot back. Trust me, I know how to make things look expensive. Silas moved the chair. He stepped back. He tilted his head. Damn, he muttered. She's right. By the evening of the second day, the warehouse had transformed. It wasn't just a storage unit anymore. It was the rusty key gallery. The entrance opened into a pathway lined with restored tools: Grandma's gardening shears, old woodworking planes, the silver carving set. It told the story of making. Then it opened up into the main hall. The furniture was arranged like living sets: a Victorian parlor, a 1920s study, and in the center, bathed in a single spotlight, stood the angel of music. She held the empty cylinder in her hands, a symbol of the secrets revealed. We stood at the door, looking at our work. "It's beautiful," Maya whispered. "It's a miracle," Silas corrected. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Hello? Mr. Thorne?" A voice said. "This is the front desk at the police station, 4th Precinct. We have a man here who was picked up for vagrancy. He refuses to give a name, but he has your business card in his pocket." My heart stopped. "I'm coming," I said. The police station smelled of bleach and despair. I waited in the lobby. 10 minutes later, an officer led a man out. It was Julian. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing a grey tracksuit that looked like it had been pulled from a donation bin. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked 20 years older. He saw me and stopped. He looked down at his feet. The arrogance was gone. The posture was gone. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the punishment. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," he whispered. "They padlocked the apartment. They took the car." I walked over to him. The officer watched us closely. "Did they charge you?" I asked. "No, just a warning, for sleeping on a park bench." Julian let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Me, Julian Thorne, sleeping on a bench I probably paid to have installed." "Let's go," I said. "Go where?" he asked, looking up. "I have nothing, Elias. No money, no influence. I'm toxic. If you are seen with me, it will hurt your case." "Get in the van," I said. I drove him to the docks. We didn't speak. The silence wasn't angry. It was heavy with the weight of everything that had changed. When we pulled up to the warehouse, Julian hesitated. "I can't go in there," he said. "After what I did." "You helped save the paintings," I said. "You pushed the crates." "I tried to put you in an asylum," he said, his voice breaking. "I called you worthless." "You were drowning," I said. "People do crazy things when they can't breathe." I opened the van door. "Come on, there is someone who wants to see you." We walked inside. The gallery was dark, lit only by the security lights. It was quiet. Sophie, Maya, and Silas had gone home to sleep before the big inspection. I led Julian to the center of the room. I flipped the switch for the spotlight. The angel of music blazed into existence. Julian gasped. He stared at the statue. He walked around it slowly, like he was afraid it would bite him. "She's incredible," he whispered. "Grandma saved her," I said. "She was burnt, black as coal. Everyone thought she was scrap metal, but Grandma saw what was underneath." Julian touched the base of the statue. "I'm scrap metal, Elias," he said softly. "I'm burnt out." "No," I said. "You're just covered in soot." I walked over to the desk from the secret room. I picked up a piece of paper I had drafted with Maya earlier that day. "Read this," I said. Julian took the paper. He squinted in the dim light. "Job offer," he read. "Logistics and Operations Manager. The Rusty Key Foundation." He looked at me, confused. "What is this?" "I know wood," I said. "I know varnish. Silas knows chemistry. Sophie knows presentation. Maya knows law. I paused. But none of us know how to run a business. None of us know how to balance a budget, negotiate with vendors, or manage the overhead of a 5-acre property. Julian stared at me. You want me to work for you? After I lost millions? You lost millions gambling on things that didn't exist, I said. Crypto, future value, speculation. That's not real. I tapped the wooden crate next to me. This is real. This is inventory. You're good at systems, Julian. You're efficient. You're ruthless when you need to be. We need that. We need someone to keep the lights on so we can do the art. I can't pay you a CEO salary, I added. I can pay you, well, minimum wage, plus room and board. There's an extra cot in the back. Julian looked at the paper. His hand was shaking. Why? He asked, tears welling in his eyes. Why would you help me? Because you're my brother, I said. And because Grandma left me a key. She didn't say I had to use it alone. Julian looked at the angel. Then he looked at me. He dropped the paper and stepped forward. He hugged me. It was awkward at first, stiff. But then he broke. He grabbed my shoulders and sobbed. He cried into my flannel shirt, smelling of sawdust and sweat. I held him. I patted his back, feeling the sharp bones through the cheap tracksuit. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry, Eli. It's okay, I said. We're fixing it. The morning of the inspection was bright and cold. Mr. Henderson from the Historical Landmark Commission arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. He was a small man with a bow tie and a clipboard, accompanied by 2 assistants. We were lined up like soldiers. Me in my clean work apron, Sophie wearing jeans and a t-shirt, a shocking sight, holding a tablet. Silas, arms crossed, hiding his tattoos under a long-sleeved shirt. Maya, looking professional in her blazer. And Julian. He had shaved. He wore one of my spare work shirts. He stood at the back, quiet, holding the inventory list. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Henderson said, peering over his glasses. I have read the application. It is ambitious. You claim this structure contains a culturally significant collection? Yes, sir, I said. Please, come in. I opened the pedestrian door. Mr. Henderson stepped inside. He stopped. His assistants stopped. The warehouse didn't look like a warehouse. It looked like a cathedral of memory. The lighting was perfect. The air was crisp. The smell of cedar and lavender hung in the air. Mr. Henderson walked slowly down the aisle. He touched the Victorian chair. He examined the silver. He looked at the maps on the wall. He didn't speak for 20 minutes. The only sound was the scratching of his pen on the clipboard. Finally, he reached the center. He stood before the angel of music. He looked up at her face. He looked at the tear. He took a deep breath. He turned to me. Is this, he stammered, is this the Claudel? Yes, Silas said, stepping forward. We have the provenance. We have the journals documenting the salvage. Mr. Henderson took off his glasses. He wiped them with a handkerchief. His hands were trembling slightly. I studied this piece in university, he said softly. My professor said it was the greatest loss of the post-war era. He said it was gone forever. He looked at me with a reverence I had never seen before. You have done a service to humanity, Mr. Thorne, he said. Not just me, I said, gesturing to the team. We did it. Mr. Henderson nodded. He checked a box on his form. A big, decisive check mark. I am approving the preliminary landmark status effective immediately, he announced. And I will be recommending a federal grant for ongoing preservation. Sophie squealed and hugged Maya. Silas smirked. Mr. Henderson turned to leave, but stopped. One question, he said. The name of the gallery. The rusty key. Why? I put my hand in my pocket. I felt the rough, pitted metal of the key. Because, I said, looking at Julian and Sophie, sometimes the things that look worthless are the only things that can open the door home. Mr. Henderson smiled. Indeed. He left. We stood there in the silence. The grant meant money. The status meant safety. We had won. So, Julian said, clearing his throat, we have a business to run. I've been looking at the heating bills. We need to install solar panels on the south roof. The ROI would be less than 2 years. Solar panels? Sophie asked. I am approving the preliminary landmark status effective immediately, he announced. And I will be recommending a federal grant for ongoing preservation. Sophie squealed and hugged Maya. Silas smirked. Mr. Henderson turned to leave but stopped. One question, he said. The name of the gallery. The rusty key. Why? I put my hand in my pocket. I felt the rough, pitted metal of the key. Because, I said, looking at Julian and Sophie, sometimes the things that look worthless are the only things that can open the door home. Mr. Henderson smiled. Indeed. He left. We stood there in the silence. The grant meant money. The status meant safety. We had won. So, Julian said, clearing his throat, we have a business to run. I've been looking at the heating bills. We need to install solar panels on the south roof. The ROI would be less than 2 years. Solar panels? Sophie asked. Are they ugly? Because if they ruin the aesthetic, I'm vetoing it. They're modern, Julian argued. They signal sustainability. I can paint them, Silas suggested. You are not painting the solar panels, Julian said, his voice rising in that familiar, bossy tone. I laughed. It was the sound of a family bickering. It was the best sound in the world. But the story wasn't quite over. Later that night, after everyone had left to celebrate with pizza and cheap beer, I stayed behind. I wanted one last moment of quiet. I sat at Grandma's desk in the secret room. I opened the drawer to put the ledger away. The drawer stuck. It's not broken, it's just stubborn. I jiggled it. I pulled harder. Something was jamming it from the back. I reached in and felt around. My fingers brushed against a small, velvet box taped to the underside of the desk. I pulled it loose. It was a ring box, but it was old, faded blue velvet. I opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a tiny, intricate golden key, much smaller than the rusty one. It looked like it belonged to a jewelry box or a clock. And underneath it, a folded scrap of paper. Elias, if you found the rusty key, you found the past. If you found this key, you are ready for the future. Look at the clock. Midnight. I stare at the note. Look at the clock. The golden mantle clock. The one I had found in the very first crate. The one with the note about eyes to see. I had restored the case, but I hadn't fixed the mechanism yet. It was sitting on the workbench in the back. I walked over to it. It was beautiful. Gold leaf and ebony. The hands were frozen at 11:55. Midnight. I took the tiny golden key. I inserted it into the winding hole on the face of the clock. I turned it. Click, click, click. The gears engaged. The ticking started. Strong, rhythmic. I moved the minute hand forward. 11:56. 11:57. At exactly 12 o'clock, the clock chimed. Bong, bong. But then, A mechanical whirring sound came from the base of the clock. A hidden drawer at the bottom of the clock popped open. Inside lay a single document, a bank book. I picked it up. It was from a Swiss bank. The account name? The Rose Trust. I opened it. The balance. My eyes widened. I had to count the zeros. It wasn't 5 million. It wasn't 10 million. It was the accumulated interest of 50 years of anonymous art dealing. The money Grandma never spent. The money she hid from Grandpa. The money she hid from everyone. The final line read, "Beneficiary, the keeper of the key. To be used for the preservation of beauty and the healing of broken things." I closed the book. I sank onto the floor. Julian had wanted millions to build a mall. Sophie had wanted millions to buy a lifestyle. Grandma had left millions. But she locked it away until we learned that we didn't need it to be happy. If I had found this on day one, I would have given it to Julian. He would have lost it. If I had found it a month ago, Sophie would have spent it. But now? Now Julian was the manager of a non-profit. Sophie was a curator. I was a restorer. We were safe. We were together. I put the bank book in my pocket next to the rusty key. I wouldn't tell them. Not yet. Let Julian install his solar panels. Let Sophie sell tickets to the gallery opening. Let us work for our supper. The money would be there when we needed to expand, when we needed to save more art. I walked to the door and flipped off the lights. The angel of music stood in the dark, smiling. "Good night, Grandma," I said. I stepped out into the cool night air. The stars were shining. The harbor smelled of salt and possibility. I locked the door with the rusty key. It turned smoothly. 3 weeks. That was how long I had been carrying the secret in my pocket. The Swiss bank book was heavy. Not physically, it was just a small blue paper booklet. But spiritually, it weighed a ton. It burned against my thigh every time I walked. I watched my brother Julian. He was sitting at a makeshift desk made from 2 sawhorses and a piece of plywood. He was wearing a flannel shirt that was too big for him, one of mine. He was on the phone, arguing with the catering company. "I understand the deposit is standard," Julian said, his voice polite but strained. "But we are a non-profit foundation. We operate on a grant cycle. Can we pay the balance net 30? He paused, listening. He rubbed his temples. "I see. No, I cannot give you a personal credit card number. That is not an option right now." "Fine. We will pick up the food ourselves. Thank you." He hung up. He looked defeated. "Trouble?" I asked, sanding the leg of a 19th century card table nearby. Julian sighed. "They want the money up front. Everyone wants the money up front when your last name is Thorne. My credit rating is radioactive, Elias. I can't even rent a tablecloth." I felt the bank book in my pocket. I could end his stress right now. I could pull out the book, write a check, and buy the catering company. But I didn't. Grandma's note had been clear. For the healing of broken things. Julian wasn't healed yet. He was still detoxing from a lifetime of thinking money solved everything. He needed to feel this. He needed to know that he could solve a problem without writing a check. "We don't need fancy caterers," I said. "We can do a potluck or finger foods." "It's a gallery opening, Elias," Julian snapped, the old arrogance flashing for a second before fading into exhaustion. "The mayor is coming. The Arts Council is coming. We can't serve them potato chips." "Why not?" Sophie's voice rang out. She walked in from the back room. She was covered in white paint. She had been painting the pedestals for the last 6 hours. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, with a paintbrush stuck through it. "People love chips," Sophie said, dropping a box of pamphlets on the desk. "Besides, the theme is salvage. It's supposed to be gritty, authentic. If we serve caviar, it looks like we're trying too hard." She picked up one of the pamphlets. She had designed them herself on a library computer. They were simple, printed on recycled paper. "The Rusty Key, a collection of lost memories." "Nice font," I said. "Thanks," she smiled. "I learnt it on YouTube." Did you know graphic design is actually hard? I used to yell at my designers for taking too long. Now I get it. She looked at Julian. "Don't worry about the food, Jules. I call that bakery on 4th Street, the one that was going out of business last year. I did a shout out for them on my Instagram, back when I had followers. They remember. They're giving us day-old pastries for free. I'll plate them up. They look vintage." Julian looked at her. He blinked. You hustled free pastries?" "I leveraged a relationship," Sophie corrected him, winking. "That's business, right?" Julian cracked a smile. It was a real smile. "That's business." I went back to sanding. The sound of the sandpaper was rhythmic. Shh, shh, shh. They were learning. They were surviving. If I gave them the millions now, they would stop climbing. And the view is always better when you climb the mountain yourself. The preparations for the grand opening feverishly continued. The warehouse had become a beacon in the dreary docklands. We had cleaned the brickwork. Silas had painted a mural on the side wall, a giant stylized key intertwined with vines. But the world outside wasn't just watching, it was judging. The press had caught the scent, a thorn project rising from the ashes of the spectacular bankruptcy. It was catnip for the tabloids. 2 days before the opening, a news van parked across the street. A reporter with a microphone stood there, filming a segment. "We are here live at the Old Harbour," the reporter said, her voice amplified by the wind. "Behind me is the new project of the disgraced Thorne family. Once the kings of real estate, now reduced to running a junk shop." Is this a genuine attempt at redemption or a desperate ploy to hide assets? I was inside, watching through the window. Julian was standing next to me. He turned pale. "They're going to crucify me," he whispered. "I can't do the speech, Elias. I can't go out there." "You have to," I said. "I'm the face of corporate greed," Julian hissed. "If I stand at that podium, they won't look at the art. They'll look at the crook. They'll ask about the pension funds. They'll ask about the loans." "Then answer them," I said. "I can't," he said, backing away. "I'll ruin the opening. You do it. You're the hero, the carpenter with the heart of gold. The media will love you." "I'm not the manager," I said firmly. "You are. You sign the permits. You organize the logistics. This is your work, Julian." "It's my penance," he shouted. "I'm just the janitor." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the back office. I stood there, frustrated. He was doing the work, but he still carried the shame like a lead weight. He didn't believe he deserved a second chance. "He's scared," Maya said, walking up beside me. She was holding a stack of legal waivers. "He thinks he's poison," I said. "He kind of is," Maya said bluntly, "legally speaking. But public opinion loves a comeback story. We just need to control the narrative." "How?" Maya looked at the reporter outside. Then she looked at the angel of music standing in the center of the room. "We don't hide the past," she said. "We weaponize it." The night before the opening, the warehouse was quiet. Silas had gone home to change into his fancy clothes, which I suspected was just a black t-shirt without holes. Maya was prepping the guest list. Sophie, was arranging the vintage pastries. I found Julian in the secret room. He was sitting in Grandma's chair, staring at the map of Europe on the wall. The room was dim, lit only by the desk lamp. Hiding? I asked. Thinking, he said. He didn't look at me. I was looking at Grandma's journals. Did you know she was investigated by the FBI in the 1960s? No, I said, surprised. Suspected of smuggling, Julian said, tapping a page. They thought she was moving gold. She was actually moving Jewish heirlooms back to their families. She was terrified. She wrote here, "My hands shake every time I cross a border. But if I stop, the history dies." He looked up at me. She was brave, Elias. Real brave. I'm a coward. You're not a coward, I said. You're ashamed. There's a difference. I walked over and sat on the edge of the desk.
You know, when I first started restoring furniture, I tried to make everything look new, I said. I used wood filler to hide every crack. I used stain to cover every scratch. I wanted it to look perfect. Julian listened, his eyes tired. But Grandma stopped me, I continued. She told me that the cracks are where the light gets in. She said, "Don't hide the wound. Heal it, but leave the scar. The scar is the story." I reached out and touched his shoulder. You have scars, Julian. Big, ugly, public scars. You bankrupted the company. You hurt people. You can't spackle over that. If you go out there tomorrow and act like a businessman, they will hate you. So, what do I do? He asked, his voice trembling. Don't be a businessman, I said. Be a brother. Be a grandson. Be the guy who pushed crates in a flood to save a statue. I stood up. And one more thing, I said. Grandma didn't leave this room to me just so I could hoard it. She left it so we could find things. I opened the drawer, the one with the false bottom where I had found the bank book. I had left the book in my pocket, but there was something else in there I hadn't shown him yet. I pulled out a small, framed photograph, black and white. It was a picture of two young boys playing in the mud in this very warehouse yard, probably 40 years ago. One boy was tall, bossy, pointing at a pile of bricks. The other was small, holding a toy hammer, listening intently. It was us. Grandma had taken it. On the back she had written, "The architect and the builder, better together." I handed it to Julian. He looked at the photo. His breath hitched. "I remember this," he whispered. "We were building a fort. I was designing the walls. And I was nailing them together," I said. Julian ran his thumb over the photo. A tear fell onto the glass. "She knew," he said, "even back then. She knew we drifted apart," I said. "And she knew this place was the only thing strong enough to pull us back together." Julian wiped his eyes. He stood up. He straightened his flannel shirt. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You ready for tomorrow?" I asked. He looked at the photo one last time, then put it in his pocket, right next to his heart. "No," he said honestly, "but I'll show up." Opening night. The air was electric. Outside, a line of cars stretched down the dock road. Not limousines, mostly Toyotas, Hondas, and taxis, but there were a few luxury sedans too. Curiosity is a powerful magnet. We opened the big rolling door. The gallery glowed. Sophie had done an incredible job. The lighting was warm and inviting. The smell of the ocean mixed with the scent of old wood and beeswax. I stood by the entrance wearing my suit. It fit a little better now. I had lost some weight from the work, but I stood taller. Silas was at the DJ booth, a restored 1940s radio console adapted to play ambient music. Sophie was working the room. She looked stunning.
Not in a designer dress, but in a vintage 1950s cocktail dress she had found in a trunk and tailored herself. She was charming the critics, not with gossip, but with facts about porcelain glazes. And Julian. Julian stood near the angel of music. He was holding a glass of sparkling water. He looked terrified. The reporter from the news van was there. She beelined for him. I tensed. I wanted to step in, but I held back. The scar is the story. I watched. Mr. Thorne, the reporter said, thrusting a microphone in his face. Many people say you have no business running a cultural foundation. They say you should be in jail for gross negligence. What do you say to the investors who lost their savings? The room went quiet. People stopped talking. They looked at Julian. Julian looked at the camera. He looked at the microphone. His hand shook slightly, but he didn't hide it. They are right, Julian said. The reporter blinked. She wasn't expecting that. I failed, Julian said, his voice carrying through the silent room. I was greedy. I was arrogant. I thought value was a number on a spreadsheet. I lost other people's money, and I lost my family's legacy. He looked around the room. He looked at me. I cannot pay back the money I lost, not yet. I am working for minimum wage. I sleep on a cot in the back office. A murmur went through the crowd. The Julian Thorne, sleeping on a cot? But, Julian continued, stepping closer to the angel, I am learning a new trade. My brother taught me that you cannot fix a broken chair by painting over it. You have to take it apart. You have to glue the joints. You have to clamp it and wait. He placed a hand on the pedestal. This gallery is not an asset. It is an apology, Julian said. It is our attempt to save things that the world threw away, including ourselves. He looked back at the reporter. So, to answer your question, I am not running this foundation. I am serving it. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn the right to be here. Silence. Then, a slow clap. It was Mr. Henderson, the landmark inspector. Then Maya clapped. Then Sophie. Then the crowd joined in. It wasn't a thunderous ovation. It was a respectful ripple of applause. It was the sound of a second chance being granted. The reporter lowered her microphone. She looked at Julian with a different expression. Not predatory, human. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He did it. He didn't run. I walked over to the bar to get a drink. My hand brushed against the pocket with the Swiss bank book. I smiled. They didn't need the money. They had just found something much more valuable. Credibility. Elias! I turned. It was Silas. He looked urgent. You need to come to the back, he said. Now. What is it? Did a fuse blow? No, Silas said. We have a visitor. He came in the back door. He says he knew your grandmother. I followed Silas through the crowd, past the smiling guests, to the small workshop area in the rear. Standing there, looking at a half-restored clock, was an old man. He was impeccably dressed in a white linen suit and a Panama hat. He leaned on a cane with a silver handle. He looked like he had stepped out of a time machine from 1920s Paris. He turned as I entered. His face was wrinkled, like a map of 1,000 journeys. His eyes were sharp, blue, and very familiar. So, the old man said. His voice was gravel and honey. You are the one with the key. Who are you? I asked. My name is Arthur Penhaligon, he said. I froze. Arthur Penhaligon, the world-famous art historian. The man who wrote the textbooks I studied in college. The man who was rumored to be the greatest rival of the silent curator. You knew Rose? I asked. Knew her? Arthur laughed softly. I loved her. We hunted the same treasures for 40 years. She was the only person who ever beat me to the angel. He walked over to me. He studied my face. "You have her eyes," he said, "and her hands." He reached into his pocket. "She sent me a letter," Arthur said, "mailed 20 years ago with instructions to open it only upon the news of her death. It arrived last week." He handed me a piece of paper. "She told me that if her grandsons could work together, if they could save the warehouse, I was to give you the final piece." "The final piece?" I asked. "Of what?" "The angel," Arthur said. "Why do you think she's holding a cylinder?" "It contained the ledger," I said, "and the tape." "That was a temporary hiding place," Arthur shook his head. "The cylinder is not a safe. It is a resonator." He held up his cane. He twisted the silver handle. It unscrewed. Inside the hollow handle was a rolled-up scroll of parchment. "The angel of music is not just a statue," Arthur whispered. "It is an instrument. Camille Claudel designed it to sing, but only if the wind hits it at the exact right angle through the specific flute hidden in the cylinder." He handed me the parchment. It was a diagram, a technical drawing of a wind flute insert.
Rose found the statue, Arthur said. But I found the voice. We fought over it. We split the treasure. She took the body. I took the song.
He looked at the door where the sounds of the party drifted in.
"She knew I would come," Arthur said. "She knew that grief would bring us together, just as it brought you and your brother together."
I looked at the diagram. "We can build this," I said, my mind already racing with the mechanics. "Silas can shape the metal. I can carve the wood."
"Do it," Arthur said. "Make her sing."
I ran back to the main room. I grabbed Julian and Sophie. "Meeting," I said. "Now." "Elias, the guests," Sophie protested. "Forget the guests," I said. "We have one more restoration to do, and we have to do it tonight." I led them to the back. I introduced them to Arthur. We looked at the diagram. "It's a wind flute," Silas said, adjusting his glasses. "Brass and reed. It slots into the cylinder. If we open the back vents of the warehouse, the harbour wind, it will blow through the statue," Julian finished, "and make a sound." "What kind of sound?" Sophie asked. "The sound of history," Arthur smiled. "Let's do it," Julian said. He took off his jacket. He rolled up his sleeves. "Sophie, keep the guests entertained. Elias, Silas, let's build." For the next hour, while the party swirled outside, we worked in the back. It was frantic. It was precise. We used scrap brass. We used old reeds from a broken organ. We were the Thorn siblings. We were broken, patched, and glued back together. And we were making music. At 11 p.m., the party was winding down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophie announced from the microphone. "Before you go, we have one final unveiling." I walked out, holding the newly constructed flute insert. It looked like a strange golden whistle. Julian stood by the door to the harbour, the big rolling door facing the ocean. "Open it," I nodded to him. Julian hit the button. The chain rattled. The door rolled up. The night wind rushed in, cold, salty, powerful. I stepped up to the angel. I reached up and slid the flute into the open cylinder in her hands. It clicked into place. We waited. The wind swirled around the room. It hit the statue. At first, nothing. Then, a low hum, like a cello bowing a single deep note. The hum grew louder. It split into harmonics. Suddenly, the angel sang. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was a haunting, ethereal chord. It sounded like a choir of women singing from a great distance. It rose and fell with the wind. Woo! Ah! Oh! The crowd gasped. Some people covered their mouths. It was the saddest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the Vienna Opera House burning. It was the sound of Grandma crying for her husband. It was the sound of Julian's regret. It was the sound of my loneliness. But as the wind picked up, the note shifted. It became higher, clearer. It became the sound of hope. I looked at Julian. He was crying openly now, smiling through the tears. Sophie was holding Maya's hand, staring up in awe. Arthur Penhaligon tipped his hat to me from the shadows. And in my pocket, the Swiss bank book felt lighter. Because I realized something. The money wasn't the legacy. This was. The song of the angel filled the warehouse, washing away the dust of the past, carrying us into the future. Success is louder than failure, but it is also messier. The morning after the opening, the warehouse was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a deep exhale after a marathon. The floor was covered in confetti, empty champagne glasses, sparkling cider for the budget-conscious, and crumpled napkins. I sat on the floor near the entrance, sweeping a pile of gold glitter into a dustpan. My head hurt, but my heart was full. Julian was already at his sawhorse desk. He had slept in his clothes. He was typing furiously on an old laptop we had salvaged. "The reviews are in," Julian said without looking up. "The Art Gazette calls it a triumph of atmospheric storytelling. The City Chronicle says, well, they say, Julian Thorne's apology tour is surprisingly convincing." He stopped typing. He looked at me. "They didn't hate me, Elias." "I told you," I said, dumping the glitter into a trash bag. "People love a comeback." Sophie walked in from the makeshift kitchen. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. She held a tray of coffees. "Don't get too comfortable," she said, handing me a cup. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked. "Did we run out of coffee?" "Worse," she said. She dropped a stack of envelopes on Julian's desk. The bills. Julian picked them up. He flipped through them. His face fell. "The roofers," he muttered. "The electrical upgrade, the insurance premium, which just tripled because we are now housing national treasures, and the property tax reassessment." He did a quick calculation in his head. I saw the old Julian stress lines reappear on his forehead. "We made $3,000 in donations last night," Julian said. "These bills total $45,000. We are in the red, deep red." "But we have the grant coming," Sophie said. "Grants take 6 months to process," Julian said, rubbing his eyes. "We need cash now, or the power gets cut off next week. And if the humidity control stops, the collection dies," I finished. Silence descended on the room. The euphoria of the opening night evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard math of survival. "I can sell the car," Julian said quietly. I don't have a car, but I have a watch. It's in the police evidence locker, but I can petition to get it back." "It's not enough," Sophie said. I checked the value of my remaining shoes, maybe $2,000. Resale market is down. They looked at each other. Two former millionaires scraping for pennies to save a warehouse. I put down my broom. I put my hand in my pocket. The blue Swiss bank book felt warm against my palm. It was time. "We don't need to sell anything," I said. I walked over to the desk. I pulled out the book. I placed it on top of the pile of bills. "What is this?" Julian asked, picking it up. "Open it," I said. Julian opened the cover.
He read the account name, the Rose Trust. He flipped to the balance. He stopped breathing. He froze like a statue. "Sophie," he whispered, "come here." Sophie walked over. She looked over his shoulder. "Is that?" She squinted. "Is that a phone number?" "It's a balance," Julian choked out. $52 million. Sophie screamed. It was a short, sharp shriek. She grabbed the desk for support. 50 million? She gasped. Where? How? Grandma, I said. She saved every penny she ever made. She invested it. Compound interest over 50 years. Julien looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with shock, and then fear. "You knew?" he asked. "How long have you known?" "Since the night of the storm," I said. "I found it in the clock." "Why didn't you tell us?" Sophie asked. "We were eating instant noodles. I pawned my engagement ring." "Because," I said, leaning against the desk, "if I had given you this money 2 weeks ago, what would you have done with it?" Sophie opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She looked at her fingernails, chipped from scrubbing floors. "I would have bought a condo," she admitted softly, "and a first-class ticket to Paris." "And I would have used it to leverage a new loan," Julian said, closing the book. "I would have tried to buy back the company." "Exactly," I said. "But now? What do you want to do with it now?" The room went quiet. The wind rattled the windows high above. Julian looked at the book. He ran his hand over the cover. It wasn't greed in his eyes anymore. It was responsibility. "This isn't our money," Julian said slowly. "What?" Sophie asked. "It's Grandma's. She left it to the keeper of the key." She pointed at me. "That's Elias, so it's ours." "Read the note in the ledger," I said. Julian pulled out the small scrap of paper I had kept inside the book. "To be used for the preservation of beauty and the healing of broken things." Julian looked up. His expression was grim but determined. "The healing of broken things," he repeated. He looked at the ledger, the other book, the black one with Grandpa's crimes. "Grandpa broke a lot of things," Julian said. "He burned down a neighborhood. He displaced 50 families. He cheated contractors. He bribed officials." He stood up. He paced the floor. The old Julian, the strategist, was waking up. But he was working for a different master now. "If we keep this money," Julian said, "we are just the heirs of a thief. We are rich, but we are stained." "So what are you saying?" Sophie asked. "We give it away?" "We paid back," Julian said. "We used the ledger. We tracked down every family Grandpa hurt, every business he ruined. We calculate the damages adjusted for inflation, and we write checks." "That could take half the fortune," Sophie said. Her voice wasn't angry, just practical. "Maybe more," Julian said. "But it clears the books. It clears the name." He looked at me. "Elias, it's your decision. You hold the key." I looked at my brother and sister. 2 weeks ago, they would have fought to the death for a percent of this money. Now, they were proposing a moral crusade. "Do it," I said. The next month was the busiest of our lives. We turned the secret room into a war room. But instead of planning a takeover, we were planning a reparation. Julian was in his element. He hired a forensic accountant, a friend from college who owed him a favor, to analyze Grandpa's black ledger. They built a database of victims. Sophie became the investigator. She used her social media skills to track people down.
She found the daughter of the shopkeeper whose store was burned in 1982. She found the contractor who went bankrupt because Grandpa refused to pay the final invoice. And I kept restoring. Because while they fixed the past, I had to keep the present alive. One evening, Julian called me into the office. "We have the first batch," he said. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. He handed me a stack of checks. Pay to the order of Sarah Jenkins. Amount $250,000. Pay to the order of the Martinez Family Trust. Amount $1.2 million. These are anonymous? I asked. Yes, Julian said. Sent from the Rose Trust. No strings attached. Just a letter apologizing for past injustices. How much is left? I asked. After we pay everyone. Julian looked at his spreadsheet. About 10 million. Enough to endow the gallery permanently. Enough to pay us a modest salary. But we won't be flying private jets. I prefer the van anyway, I said. Me too, Julian smiled. Then Sophie burst into the room. She was holding a tablet. She looked pale. You need to see this, she said. What? I was tracking down the last name on the list, she said. The payment to arsonist 1982. The man Grandpa paid to start the fire. We're not paying him, Julian said. He was a criminal. No, Sophie said. But he died in prison. I found his son. She swiped the screen to show a profile. His son is Silas Vane. The room stopped. The air left my lungs. Silas? I whispered. Our Silas? Grandpa paid Silas's father to burn the district, Sophie said, her voice shaking. His father got caught. He went to jail for 20 years. Silas grew up in foster care. That's why he was so angry. That's why he hates the system. I sat down heavily in the chair. Silas had been working with us for weeks. He had saved the angel. He had slept on the floor. And all this time, he was the son of the man my grandfather destroyed. Does he know? Julian asked. Does he know we are those thorns? He must, I said. The name is on the building. Then why did he help us? Sophie asked. Why didn't he burn the place down himself? I stood up. I grabbed the checkbook. Where is he? I asked. He's in the workshop, Sophie said, polishing the clock. I walked into the main gallery. It was late. The shadows were long. Silas was standing at the workbench. He was carefully polishing the brass gears of the golden mantel clock, the very clock that had hidden the money. He didn't look up when I approached. You missed a spot on the bezel, he said casually. Silas, I said. He stopped polishing. He put the cloth down. He didn't turn around. You found the name in the ledger, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Took you long enough, he muttered. I thought your brother was the smart one. Why? I asked. Why did you help us? Your father... Silas turned around. His face was unreadable behind his glasses. My father was a weak man, Silas said. He took money to do a bad thing. He deserved to go to jail. I don't blame your grandfather for offering the bribe. I blame my father for taking it. He picked up a screwdriver. But I did hate you, he admitted. When Maya first called me, I wanted to come here and smash everything. I wanted to see the Thorn legacy turn to dust. What changed? I asked. Silas looked over at the angel of music. She stood in the moonlight, serene and whole. The work, Silas said softly. You didn't treat these things like assets, Elias. You treated them like patients. I watched you cry over a broken chair leg. I watched you sleep on concrete to protect a painting. He looked me in the eye. Restoration isn't about the object, he said. It's about the restorer. You want your grandfather. You were trying to fix his mess. I respected that. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the check I had just written. It was blank. Julian is paying back everyone, I said. Every victim. I want you to fill this out. Whatever number you think is fair. For your childhood, for the foster homes. I held the check out to him. Silas looked at the check. He looked at my hand. He laughed. A dry, rasping laugh. He took the check and he tore it in half. I don't want your blood money, Elias, he said. I'm an artist. I pay my own way. He tossed the confetti of paper into the trash bin. Besides, he added, adjusting his glasses,
You already paid me. How? You gave me the angel, he said. You let me touch a masterpiece, and you let me prove that I'm not just a forger, that I'm a creator. He picked up his rag. But, he added, I will take a raise and dental insurance. My back is killing me from this floor. I smiled. My eyes burned. Done, I said. Dental, vision, and a proper bed. Good, Silas said. Now hand me the oil. This gear is stuck. The next morning, the letters went out. 500 envelopes. The Rose Trust. We didn't wait for thank yous. That wasn't the point. Julian sat at the desk, looking at the bank balance. It was significantly smaller. Any regrets? I asked. We just gave away $40 million, Julian said. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee. I should be having a heart attack. But I slept 8 hours last night, he said. First time in 10 years. No pills, no nightmares. He looked at the ledger, the black one. Burn it, he said. What? The ledger, Julian said. We paid the debts. We balanced the books. We don't need to keep the record of the crimes anymore. It's done. I picked up the black book. It felt lighter now. The malice was gone. Let's do it together, I said. We walked out to the dock behind the warehouse. Sophie came with us. We found an old metal barrel we used for scrap wood. I tossed the ledger inside. Julian struck a match. For Grandpa, he said. May he finally rest in peace. He dropped the match. The dry paper caught instantly. The flames curled up, turning the secrets, the bribes, and the shame into gray smoke. We watched it burn. The smoke rose up, caught by the harbor wind, and drifted out to sea. So, Sophie said, watching the sparks fly. We're not billionaires. We're just normal rich? We're comfortable, Julian corrected. If we stick to the budget. Boring, Sophie sighed, but she was smiling. She linked her arm through mine. Hey, can I curate the next exhibition? I have an idea. What is it? I asked. Broken dolls, she said. I found a box of them in the back. Creepy, but cool. I want to tell the story of childhood's lost. I like it, I said. I'll run the numbers, Julian said automatically. We laughed. The fire died down. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I put my hand in my pocket. I felt the rusty key and the tiny golden key. They were just metal, but they had unlocked everything. I have one more thing to do, I said. What? Julian asked. I need to visit someone, I said, and I need you guys to come with me. The cemetery was quiet. It was an old one, on a hill overlooking the city. We found the stone. It was simple. Granite. Moss was starting to grow on the edges. Rose thorn. Beloved grandmother. Keeper of beauty. We stood there in silence, the three of us. I knelt down. I placed a small object on the grave. It was the music box. The one I had fixed when I was 10.
The one that started it all. I wound the key. Tink, tink, tink. Claire de Lune began to play. The melody drifted through the graveyard, mixing with the sound of the wind in the trees. We did it, Grandma, I whispered. We didn't sell it, and we didn't kill each other. We fixed the roof, Julian added softly. And I learned how to use a broom, Sophie said. The music played on. I looked at the grave. I realized that her real masterpiece wasn't the angel of music. It wasn't the collection. It wasn't the money. It was us. She had taken 3 broken, selfish, lost children, and she had given us a project that forced us to become a family. She was the ultimate restorer. Thank you, I said. I stood up. The music box slowed down and stopped. Let's go home, I said. To the villa? Sophie asked. No, I said. To the warehouse. It's pizza night. I'm driving, Julian said. No way, Sophie said. You drive like a grandpa. I'm driving. I have the keys, I said, jingling them. We walked down the hill, arguing about toppings, our voices fading into the twilight. Behind us, on the cold stone, the music box sat silent, waiting for the next person who had the patience to listen. 6 months later, the seasons had changed. The biting wind of the harbor winter had softened into a warm, salty spring breeze. The sign above the warehouse door had been repainted. Silas did it. It was no longer just Storage Unit 4. It was now hand-lettered in gold and black. The Rusty Key Foundation. Restoration, Education, Community. I stood on the dock at 7 a.m., holding a cup of coffee. I watched the sun rise over the water. It was the same sun that had risen over my despair months ago. Now, it rose over my purpose. The big rolling door was already open, but it wasn't quiet inside. Move the hydrangea to the left, a voice shouted. It needs morning sun. I smiled. Julian. I walked inside. The concrete apron in front of the warehouse, once a dumping ground for industrial waste, was now a riot of green. Julian was on his knees in the dirt. He was wearing muddy jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Dirt don't hurt." He was wrestling with a massive planter box. "Good morning, head gardener," I said. Julian looked up. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a dirty glove. He looked healthy. The grey pallor of the boardroom was gone, replaced by a slight tan. "The soil acidity is off," Julian said seriously. "I need to add more compost, and the worms are late." "The worms?" "I ordered 2,000 red wigglers for the compost bin," Julian said. "Logistics, Elias. If the supply chain fails, the tomatoes suffer." I laughed. He was still Julian. He still obsessively managed systems. But now, instead of managing hedge funds, he was managing earthworms. And he seemed infinitely happier. "Sophie's inside," Julian said, pointing with a trowel. "She's panicking about the glitter glue supply." I walked into the main gallery. It had changed again. The angel of music was still there, the centerpiece of the room. But the space around her was different. We had cleared out the side aisles to make room for long work tables. Sophie was standing at the head of a table, surrounded by 20 children from the local elementary school. "Okay, listen up, artists." Sophie clapped her hands. She was wearing an artist's smock covered in paint splatters, pink, blue, neon green. "Today, we are not making perfect things. What are we making? Honest things," the kids shouted back in unison. "Exactly," Sophie beamed. "If your clay pot is lopsided, that's just its personality. If you color outside the lines, that's just you exploring the world. Now go." Chaos erupted. Happy, creative chaos. Sophie moved among them like a butterfly. She praised a crooked drawing. She helped the little girl tie her apron. She wasn't the influencer anymore. She was a teacher. She was feeding her soul, not her ego. I watched her for a moment. She caught my eye and winked, then went back to helping a boy glue a button onto a cardboard robot.
I walked to the back, to the workshop.
This was my domain. The smell of cedar was strong here. Silas was at his bench. He was listening to heavy metal music on low volume while he soldered a stained glass lamp. "Morning, boss," Silas grunted. "Don't call me boss," I said, putting on my apron. "You have seniority." "I have a grievance," Silas said, not looking up. "The coffee machine in the break room is making a noise. A B-flat whirring sound. It's annoying." "I'll fix it," I said. "Good, because I have a backlog." He gestured to a shelf. It was full of objects brought in by the community. A toaster from the 1950s, a broken violin, a doll with a missing arm. We didn't charge for repairs anymore, not for the locals. The endowment from the Rose Trust covered the overhead. We fixed things for free, on one condition. The owner had to tell us the story of the object. We recorded the stories. We were building a library of memories. I picked up the first item on the list. It was a small wooden sailboat, hand-carved with a broken mast. Attached was a tag. "Belongs to Mr. Henderson." Yes, the inspector. Carved by his father in 1960. I smiled. I picked up my chisel. I began to work. The day passed in a blur of sawdust and conversation. At lunch, we all sat together at the long table in the garden. Julian brought out a salad made from lettuce he had grown himself. He was ridiculously proud of it. "Taste the crunch," Julian commanded. "That is the taste of nitrogen balance." "It tastes like a leaf, Jules," Sophie teased, chewing happily. "It tastes like victory," Julian insisted. We talked about the budget, stable. We talked about the roof, leak-free. We talked about the angel. She sang yesterday during a brief squall, scaring a delivery driver half to death. It was mundane. It was boring. It was perfect. As the sun began to set, the kids went home. Sophie cleaned up the paint. Julian watered his hydrangeas one last time. I was locking up the workshop when I heard a knock at the pedestrian door. It was a timid knock, barely audible. I walked over and opened it. Standing there was a boy, maybe 12 years old. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up over his head. He looked nervous. He was clutching a plastic grocery bag to his chest. "We're closed, kid," Silas called out from the back. "It's okay," I said. "Can I help you?" The boy looked at me, then at the angel glowing in the twilight behind me. Are you the fixer?" he asked. "I'm Elias," I said. "My mom said you fix things," the boy whispered. "Even things that are garbage." He opened the plastic bag. He pulled out a clock. It was a cheap plastic superhero alarm clock, the kind you buy at a discount store for $10. But it was smashed. The plastic face was cracked, the battery cover was missing. One of the superhero's arms was broken off. "My dad gave it to me," the boy said, his voice trembling. "Before he left, he said as long as it ticks, he'll come back." He looked down at the clock. "I dropped it. It stopped ticking." He looked up at me, his eyes full of tears. "Can you fix it? I don't have any money." I looked at the cheap plastic clock. To an antique dealer, it was trash. To Julian a year ago, it was landfill. But to this boy, it was a lifeline. I knelt down. I took the clock from his hands. I treated it with the same reverence I gave the Louis XIV chair. I shook it gently. Something rattled inside, a loose connection. "It's not broken," I told him softly. The boy sniffled. "It's not?" "No," I said. "It's just stubborn." I smiled at him.
Come inside, I'll show you. I led him to the workbench. I sat him on a stool. I handed him a small screwdriver. "You're going to fix it," I said. "I'll just help." Sophie watched from the doorway. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. We spent an hour on that clock. I showed him how to solder the wire. I showed him how to glue the plastic arm back on. When we put the battery in, the second hand twitched. Then it moved. Tick, tick, tick. The boy's face lit up. It was brighter than the lighthouse in the harbor. "It works!" he cheered. "It works," I agreed. He hugged the clock. Then, surprisingly, he hugged me. "Thank you," he whispered. He ran out the door into the night, clutching his treasure. I stood there watching him go. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Julian. "That," Julian said softly, "was a good investment." "High yield," I agreed. We closed the warehouse for the night. Silas went to his new apartment. Above a bakery, he complained about the smell of bread, but we knew he loved it. Sophie went to her loft downtown. Julian went to his room in the back office. He said he wanted to finish reading a book on vermiculture. I was the last one to leave. I walked through the silent gallery. The moonlight filtered in through the high windows, bathing the restored furniture in silver light. I stopped at the entrance. On the wall, near the door, was a small frame I had hung up yesterday. Inside the frame was a key. It was old. It was made of iron. The head was shaped like a clover, and one leaf was bent. It was pitted with rust. It was the key Grandma gave me. I hadn't used it in months. We had installed a new electronic security system. We didn't need the rusty key to open the door anymore. But I kept it. I looked at the plaque beneath it. I had written the inscription myself. "The key to yesterday." It opens nothing, but it revealed everything. I touched the glass. I thought about the journey, the anger, the fear, the storm, the music. Grandma didn't give me the key because she wanted me to open a warehouse. She gave me the key because she wanted me to open myself. She knew I was like the wood, shut tight, afraid of the light. She knew Julian was like the veneer, shiny but thin. She knew Sophie was like the glass, fragile and sharp. She used the warehouse to sand us down, strip us back, and rebuild us. And the rust? The rust was the most important part. The rust proved it was real. The rust proved it had weathered the storm. I turned away from the frame. I walked out the pedestrian door. I locked the new lock with my modern key. Click. I turned to walk to my van. But then I stopped. I looked up at the sky. It was a clear night. The stars were brilliant. "Hey, Grandma," I whispered into the darkness. A wind blew from the harbor. It rushed past the warehouse. Inside, faintly through the brick walls, I heard a sound. Whoa! The angel was singing a lullaby. I smiled. I got in my van. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove, listening to the hum of the tires, driving toward tomorrow, leaving the key to yesterday hanging on the wall where it belonged. The story wasn't about the treasure. It was about the hands that held it. And my hands were finally steady.